Episode 266. We need to destroy it. The night had been cold, but the moon had shone brightly. Sarah had stared at it blankly from the quiet room. Her thoughts had turned negative, and she hadn't anyone to tell her to hold on and fight. She had started to think that maybe there was nothing more to life than just living for a while and then dying. She had never thought that there was anything special about life in the first place. The saddest thing was that she had started thinking so negatively at such a young age. She had stood up and leaned against the window frame, still staring at the moon. "Do you still think there's hope for us?" she had asked it. The moon had stayed silent, but that hadn't stopped her questions. "Should we give up? Is there any point in fighting when you know you're just going to lose in the end?" Her pale face had darkened, and she had wanted to cry for help, to stop the darkness from creeping into her mind. She had dropped to the floor in dismay. A sound had reached her ears through the open window. She stood up again and looked out. The beautiful music coming from the only lit room in the building across from hers had given her goosebumps. The music had been beautiful, and it had touched her heart and soul. It was as if the moon had answered her through a sorrowful and hopeful song, telling her not to give up. She had clenched her fists tightly and listened. Her heart had pounded as though it had been revived by the song, and she had felt the slightest ray of hope that everything might not be over yet. When the song had ended, her eyes had lit up. She had wanted to rush over to the building to see who had played it. "That was beautiful. Whoever you are, thank you," she had whispered to the wind, knowing that she couldn't leave her room. Then she heard her father's voice. Yes, it was beautiful. I haven't heard anything like it in a long time," he had said. She had walked over to the bed he had been lying on and held his hand without saying a word. "My little girl, I'm so sorry you've had to live like this. I'm so sorry that you've never experienced a normal life. I'm so sorry," he had continued. His voice had been hoarse and filled with pain. "Daddy, please don't apologize. I know you didn't want this to happen. And don't worry, I'll fight back and we'll get out of here. I promise," she had said, her eyes filled with determination. Her father had already fallen asleep, and he hadn't heard her words. Time had passed, and her parents had kept working on their invention. Eventually, the day before the deadline had arrived. Since her mother had been so worried about her father's health, the invention had been a failure. Her parents had lost all hope, especially when they had learned that her father only had a few months left to live. They had felt powerless until she had told them some shocking news. They hadn't believed her at first, so she had shown them the experiment she had been working on. She had developed a dangerous bioweapon using genome editing technology. "When I was playing last year, I got the idea for it. She had started to say, but her mother had interrupted her. "Oh my God, Sarah, please stop. Don't do this," she had said, agitated and fearful. She had turned to her husband, who had also looked stunned, and said, "Arthur, we need to stop this." Her parents' face had turned pale. She had been shocked, since she had expected them to be happy. Her father had knelt in front of her and held her shoulders. "Listen to me," he had said. "You can't make things like that. We're sorry we didn't tell you before, but they'll use it to kill people. A lot of people. It's impressive, but they'll just use it as a weapon." She had frozen. All she had wanted to do was save her family. She hadn't even thought about what might happen to other people, and it had been hard for her to accept she had done anything wrong. "Michelle, we have to destroy it before anyone finds out about it," her father had said to her mother. "How?" her mother had asked. Sarah had said, "So we're all just going to die here then? We'll die tomorrow if we don't show them." Her parents' eyes had widened in shock. Episode 267, More Than a Dream. Sarah's father had kissed her forehead. "Listen, sweetie," he had said gently. "We know how hard you worked, and we know you want to help us, but we can't sacrifice thousands of lives. Don't worry, okay? I'm your father, and it's my job to keep you safe. So I'll think of something. I promise." That night, her parents had started to make a plan. Thinking that she was asleep, they had discussed her experiment, and they had agreed that the world should never find out about it. They had talked for several hours. Her father had told her mother to leave town the next day with her. His plan had been to use her experiment as blackmail so they could escape. Then he would destroy it. Her mother had sobbed. She had realized that he was going to sacrifice himself, but as much as that had hurt her, she had also realized that without his sacrifice, all three of them would die. "Listen, honey," he had said, "you need to take Sarah and get out of here. I only have a few days left anyway, but she can still have a normal life. If you get her out of here, I'll die in peace with no regrets. It's my last wish. I love you both so much, and I'll always be with you." Sarah had overheard their conversation, and tears had flowed down her face as she had heard her father saying goodbye to her mother. Her father's plan had worked, and she and her mother had been allowed to leave. The organization hadn't realized that her father had already programmed the explosion of the nuclear weapon that he and the other scientists had created. It would explode the moment they had seized him. Arthur had demanded a plane to take his family to Talavancha, As the plane carrying Michelle and Sarah had departed, an announcement had been broadcast throughout the town, warning residents to leave immediately because of a radiation leak. The announcement had been part of her father's plan to limit the casualties. The locals had left immediately, but the rogue scientists and the members of Blackleaf had remained, since they were sure that the announcement had been a lie. They had had no idea what her father had been doing, and that he had been trying to buy more time before detonating the bomb. Michelle had instructed her daughter to put her parachute on because she had known that the pilot would turn back to Kentroma. As she had anticipated, the plane had changed directions just before crossing over into Talavancha. They had jumped out as the blast had destroyed Alta Vista. They had landed by the border and walked to a nearby town. Sarah had been injured, so her mother had taken her to a doctor first before moving on. That night, though, as they had traveled to Talavancha, their car had crashed. Haley woke up, her eyes wide and unfocused. She remained in a daze for a while, and then she realized that she had not just been dreaming. What had seemed like a nightmare might actually be a long-lost memory. "Haley, are you all right?" A voice called. She recognized the voice as Amy's and remembered that she had been involved in another car accident on her way to the hospital for her checkup. Her eyes widened again when she saw her stomach. "My child! What happened to my baby? Where's my baby?" she cried, her face turning as white as a ghost. "Haley, calm down. He's fine, okay? He's all right. He's in the neonatal intensive care unit, and he's fine, okay?" Amy said, and Haley teared up. "My son. Amy, I want to see him," she said. Amy, helped by a nurse, got her into a wheelchair and pushed her toward the room where her son was. When they reached the intensive care unit, Haley touched her son's incubator and cried, "See? He's super cute. The doctor said he's all right, so don't worry, okay?" Amy said. Haley smiled through her tears. She couldn't believe that she had had a child. She was a mother, and she couldn't describe the joy she felt looking at the tiny human she had made. Episode 268. Should I tell him? Tyler faced a dilemma. He had just gotten news that Haley had been involved in a minor car accident that had led to the premature delivery of her baby. He knew that he should tell Brad, but he was afraid of what would happen when he learned that his wife had been hurt. He remembered what had happened when he had told Brad about her pregnancy 5 months earlier, and the memory made him cringe. The news had completely destroyed his focus, rendering him barely functional. Normally as fast as a supercomputer, he had become as sluggish as the earliest generation of computers, and had occasionally frozen completely. He had been useless for long periods of time. Tyler had thought Brad would feel more motivated after learning that he was going to be a father, but the opposite had happened, making him regret having said anything. Brad had grown distracted and had slowed down so much that Tyler had wanted to poke him and say, "Giddy up, horse," to get him moving. Brad had been drowning in worry, and even though he hadn't said anything, it was obvious that he wanted to rush back home to Haley. The only thing that had stopped him from flying back was the realization that he would be putting her and their child in danger. Tyler had done his best to coax him out of his despair. He had tried to get Brad to refocus on his mission so that he would be able to go home before her due date. His efforts had made very little difference until he had agreed to take a risk and let Brad see her, but on the condition that he would watch from afar and not make contact with her. After lengthy and difficult preparations, they had both made their way back to New York despite the extreme danger. Tyler had been worried and anxious, but watching Brad's reaction to seeing Haley had made him smile. She had just left the hospital with Amy and Owen, her baby bump already showing. Brad, watching from the back seat of a car, had been on the verge of tears, his face pressed to the window and his eyes showing an intense longing. He had gripped Tyler's shoulder and repeatedly said, "I'm a father. Haley and I have a child. I'm a father." He had sounded like a broken record, but his reaction had been priceless. Tyler had teased him, saying that it was okay to cry, but he hadn't shed a single tear. He had also handcuffed him to the car in case he forgot their agreement and tried to approach her. Luckily, Brad had managed to control himself and not put his wife and child in danger. They had followed her for an entire day, and Brad had lit up. He had seen that she was healthy and happy, and her smiles had soothed his worried heart. Tyler had been delighted to see Brad returning to his fast and efficient self. He had told the father-to-be that she was healthy and that his grandfather was watching over her, but Brad had still demanded that he assign 100 of the most skilled nurses to watch her around the clock. The demand had seemed a bit excessive, but Tyler had done it so that they could get back to their mission. It had taken almost 2 months for Brad to completely regain his focus. Those months had been painful for everyone because of his tendency to fall into a daze. His frequent distractions had lengthened the estimate of how long it would take to complete their mission. As he remembered all of the distractions and delays, Tyler debated whether or not to tell Brad about Haley's accident. They were close to the end of the mission, and he had already confirmed that it had only been a minor accident. The real problem was the baby's premature birth. Brad had been working tirelessly to make it back by Haley's due date. Episode 269, The Bearer of Bad News. After almost an hour of weighing the pros and cons, Tyler finally decided not to tell Brad about Haley's accident, which turned out to be the right decision. Brad had other things on his mind. He had finally learned the truth, and neither of them could believe it. The witness they had found, who had been quietly hiding in the mountainous region of Cantroma the whole time, had revealed everything. He was a close friend of Arthur Dawson, the man who had blasted the town, and was also the one who had helped Arthur warn everyone to leave. He'd even revealed his daughter Sarah's experiment and her role in the blast. The truth was too shocking for Brad to accept. From the moment he had seen the picture of a younger Haley on the list, his mind had been racing. He had initially ignored his concern, and had even asked his team to remove her from the list. His insistence that she be removed from the investigation had stalled their mission for a long time. It was not until he had allowed the investigation to continue that they had started to make progress. From that point on, the mysteries had started to unravel. She had been the key all along, no matter how unbelievable it had seemed. Brad hadn't been able to process her involvement at first, so he had looked for a witness who could confirm what he had learned. When the witness did confirm it, Brad didn't know how to react. No one could have known that the person Brad had really been searching for the entire time was Haley's biological father, or that her creation was behind the explosion that the world had blamed on him. Tyler, who had been carefully monitoring Brad's reaction, was speechless. He could see how hurt Brad was after learning that Haley was just like them. She too had gone through hell during her childhood. They both realized that she had probably lost her memory, which was how she had managed to live a normal life since her foster parents had adopted her. Tyler was dying to know what Brad was thinking. They had both thought that learning the truth would finally set Brad free. It should have been a cause for celebration. Their long mission had ended, and they had uncovered the truth, but it was so shocking that they didn't know what to do next. Fate seemed to enjoy tormenting them. They quietly returned to Lascomar. "What's next?" Tyler asked. He got no response and couldn't even guess what Brad was thinking. Brad looked up, leaned back on his chair, and closed his eyes. After a long silence, he took a deep breath and said, "Let's talk about it later. Don't worry. I have a plan. This isn't over yet, but for now, we're going back. I want to see her. I miss her so much that I feel like I'll die if I don't see her soon." Tyler felt like the wind had been knocked out of him. He still hadn't told Brad that Haley was in the hospital and that their baby had already been born. On the flight back, Brad's fatigue finally showed. He refused to sleep, though. He was too excited to rest, and Tyler was worried that he might pass out in the hospital if he didn't get some sleep. Okay, what now? Do I tell him that his wife was rushed to the hospital so that he'll faint and get some rest? That might be better than him passing out in the hospital, he thought. Thinking that it would be easier to tell him on the plane, Tyler prepared himself to deliver the bad news. Luckily, there was a doctor standing by in case anything bad happened. "Anyway, Brad, I got a message a few hours ago. This might shock you, but," he said, looking at his companion with curiosity and apprehension. "What happened?" Brad asked. Tyler took a deep breath. "Just stay calm, 'cause everything is all right. You understand? Just spit it out." "Okay. Haley was in a car accident and she's in the hospital," he said. What? What did you say?" Brad stammered, his eyes wide. "She's in the hospital, but they said she's fine, so..." Tyler paused, noticing that Brad had frozen. He waved his hand in front of Brad's face, but when there was no reaction, he kept talking. "Hey, are you still there? Don't just freeze like that. You're supposed to faint." Episode 270, An Unexpected Visitor. Haley cried quietly in the intensive care unit, her tears rolling down her face. Amy, Owen, and the nurses begged her to go back to her room and rest. She agreed, even though she hated the thought of being away from her son. She was a mess. Her memories of her childhood had returned. She didn't know what to do. She wished that she could just focus on her son and dismiss her memories as mere dreams, but she couldn't. Someone came into her room. When she looked up at the doctor standing at the foot of her bed, her eyes widened. Mom? She stammered in disbelief. The woman was, in fact, her biological mother, Michelle, disguised as a doctor so that she could visit her daughter. They had been separated when their car had crashed 10 years earlier. "Yes, sweetie, it's me," she replied, and they embraced each other. Haley hadn't known that she was still alive. "Mom, where have you been all this time? Why did you leave me?" she asked through her tears. "Hush, sweetie, not now. I'll tell you everything, but we need to get out of here first," she said. Haley was stunned. "What do you mean? Why do we need to leave?" she asked as she gently pushed her mother away. "Listen to me. I started looking for you several months ago because someone was trying to uncover the truth about what happened to Alta Vista, and now they seem to have found out. You're not safe. You'll be investigated, and both government agencies and terrorist organizations will be coming for you. Do you understand?" she said. Haley was shocked to the core and felt like she couldn't breathe. She didn't want to believe what her mother had told her. She knew what she had created. No matter how much she denied it, she was the reason Alta Vista had been annihilated. Mom, I have a child. I have a son. I can't just... Her mother cut her off. You need to leave him. Haley violently shook her head and yelled, No! Her mother covered her mouth to silence her and said, Listen, sweetie, I know you just gave birth. I just saw my cute grandson in the incubator, but you need to leave him. Can you even imagine what will happen to both of you if the government catches you? You have to leave him if you want him to have a normal life. Unlike us, he has a bright future ahead of him. Nobody will hurt him if you leave him. He can live the normal life that you never had. And the only way for that to happen is to leave him. Haley kept crying and her heart broke. She shook her head again, unable to accept what her mother had told her. Her resistance saddened Michelle, but she knew what she had to do. She signaled to a man dressed as a nurse, and he pressed a handkerchief to Haley's face. Just a few seconds later, Haley felt herself slipping into darkness. Haley opened her eyes inside a submarine somewhere in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. It took her a long time to understand and accept what had happened. She knew that she was the one Brad had been looking for all along, and she was overcome with guilt. Her heart broke when she realized that she was the reason that he had suffered for so long. Her innocent husband had taken the blame that should have been hers. He had gone through hell while she had lived a normal life, and that realization nearly drove her crazy. Eventually, she convinced herself that leaving them was the right decision, and she accepted that it was her turn to suffer. After all, she had fulfilled her part of the bargain. From the beginning, her mission had been to give him a child, and the contract had stated that the child wouldn't be hers. The only problem was that she and Brad had fallen in love with each other. At least he and their baby could finally live in peace. Maybe that's what was meant to happen all along, she thought. Episode 271, A Rescue Mission. 5 years passed. The recently crowned king of the business world, Kevin Clark, who was also known to his close associates and enemies as Brad Lopez, was sitting like a tyrant in the dimly lit hall in the headquarters of Clark International Corporation, and glaring at the man giving a presentation in front of him. The tension in the hall was so great that everyone felt like their blood was turning to ice. Nobody moved. They all knew how terrifying Kevin Clark could be. He had brought his own father, Brandon Rockman, the previous king of the business world, to his knees. He had taken everything that Brandon had held dear, starting with his fame and then moving on to his money, his glory, and his power, all within 2 years. He'd even put him in jail after destroying him. Kevin's power was unprecedented. It was as if he had suddenly descended from the heavens and turned the business world upside down with the speed and simplicity of a game of rock, paper, scissors. He was known to be ruthless, and nobody dared to cross him. He had destroyed not only his own father, but also the entire Hughes family, Brandon's second wife's family. He had caused the Hughes Corporation's bankruptcy, getting them blacklisted and sending Rachel Hughes to jail along with his father. He had revealed all their crimes, including the assassination of his mother, Riley Lopez. Everything that had happened in the previous 5 years had seemed unreal. The world had witnessed the appearance of a dark horse who had trampled on the most powerful people like they were ants. Power had been redistributed, and nobody had dared to challenge the new leader. The world had gained not just a new business leader, but also a new hero. The truth about the annihilation of the town of Alta Vista had been revealed, and Brad's name had been cleared, even before he had started planning his revenge years earlier. He had exposed the truth, and the government that had been hunting him had pardoned him. He had helped his own case by negotiating with the dominant world powers, who had preferred him as an ally. He had also been absolved of his childhood cybercrimes. Only Tyler knew that the case wasn't closed. A year earlier, Brad had finally executed his plan, convincing the world that the man they had thought was responsible for the blast was actually a savior. He had managed to shift the blame back to Blackleaf by revealing that they had forced the scientists to formulate a bioweapon that could destroy the world, and that Arthur Dawson had sacrificed his life to destroy their research by blasting the entire town, taking the scientists down with him. The revelation had rocked the world for an entire year. Everyone had wondered what would happen if Mr. Dawson hadn't destroyed the weapon. They had come to see him as a hero for keeping such a weapon out of the hands of Blackleaf and other terrorist organizations. Brad's plan had worked. He had wanted to destroy Blackleaf, and he had succeeded. He had also destroyed everyone who had wronged him. His wrath had been so terrifying that world leaders had started to fear him. He had become an ice-cold monster. When the presenter stopped, Brad remained silent. He raised his hand to indicate that the next presenter could begin, but before the presentation started, the door opened. The man known as his right hand and younger brother, Tyler Clark, appeared. He dashed toward Brad and whispered in his ear, "Brad, something has happened. Shan's been kidnapped from school," he said. Brad's eyes blazed with such darkness and intensity that everyone except Tyler held their breath. He stood up and left the hall without a word. The kidnapper seems to be one of his teachers. Your forces are on their way," Tyler continued as they both headed up to the rooftop. Brad replied, "No, call the city's forces right now." New York City's forces, known as the Thunder Squad, were among the most powerful and highly trained in the world. They had recently returned from a year-long mission. They only undertook the most challenging and crucial missions, but they would respond to Brad's call and rescue his son. The more Tyler thought about it, the more he realized that saving Sean was as important as an anti-terrorist mission, possibly more important. If something bad happened to the boy, Tyler couldn't even begin to imagine what Brad would do. A helicopter arrived and they boarded it. As it headed off in search of Sean, Brad's aura chilled the atmosphere. Tyler said, "Okay, the Thunder Squad has been dispatched." Brad quietly stared out the window. He had worked with the Thunder Squad before. They had been one of the tools that he had used to gain world leaders' trust. He had formulated a tactical strategy to rescue the president of Celester from a hijacked plane, and the only team that had executed his plan to perfection was the Thunder Squad. He had been genuinely impressed. That mission had been almost impossible, but its success had shown the world what he could do. It was the turning point that had made the world leaders realize that he was a needed ally and not an enemy. Episode 272, A Tight Embrace. A car was parked in front of a huge fountain in the middle of the city. A woman inside the car held a gun while a 5-year-old boy sat quietly and looked at her. "Sean, do you know that your father is a monster? No wonder you don't have a mom. She probably got too scared of him and left you," she taunted with a hint of craziness in her voice. "No, my dad says she'll come back soon. We're waiting for her," Sean said. His voice was serious and honest, and his ethereally beautiful smoky grayish silver eyes were filled with determination and a fighting spirit. His sincerity made his teacher laugh maniacally. She had always been nice to him at school, so his older brother Leo had never suspected her. "He's lying. Do you know who I am? He destroyed my family, the Hughes, so I'm going to kill you. I'll make him suffer like I did. I'll make him feel the pain of losing the only thing he cares about. You can blame him for your death," she said as she laughed hysterically. She raised the gun, but before she could point it at his head, a bullet pierced her arm. Just a few seconds later, Sean was pulled out of the car, and he was in the hands of a group of masked and uniformed commandos. A huge shoulder carried Sean toward a van. "Sergeant, here he is. Check if he's been injured." "Yes, Captain. Leave him with me," the soldier said. A woman wearing the same uniform as the soldier said as she took the boy. When her eyes met Sean's, something pierced both of their hearts. Haley, now called Sarah, gazed at the young boy in her arms. He was beautiful, and as she stared into his eyes, she remembered where she had seen them before, making her heart race. "It's just a coincidence," she forced herself to think. "Are you all right, sweetie? Did she hurt you? Let me check you, okay?" she asked, managing to keep her voice calm and control her racing heart. After all of her training over the years, she was able to suppress her emotions easily. Sean looked up at her. He was in shock, but when he saw her, he felt an urge to hug her. He threw his arms around her neck. Haley was surprised, and her heart skipped a beat. He wrapped his arms around her and rested his face on her shoulder, and she hugged him back. The van fell silent as they hugged each other. Haley's emotions were going wild, and it was becoming difficult for her to keep suppressing them. No matter how much she denied it, she sensed that he might be the son she had left behind. Her heart pounded with both pain and joy, and she wanted to cry. Her grip on Sean tightened, but she couldn't speak. She couldn't even begin to describe her emotions anymore. All she knew was that she wanted time to stand still so she could keep him in her arms. Brad and Tyler arrived in a black car. The Thunder Squad soldiers were excited to meet the man behind the perfect strategy they had executed years ago, and they chatted to each other as the car pulled up. "I can't believe we're finally meeting him." "Well, if that boy hadn't been his son, we wouldn't have taken on the mission in the first place." "Yeah, but this was as important as all the high-profile ones we've done. Think about what he would have done if we had arrived just a few minutes later." "Good point. I heard what a monster he can be. I bet he could destroy the world if he wanted to." "Yeah, and I've heard that only a few people have ever seen him in person, despite his fame. Seems like he hates publicity and likes being alone." "Quiet, he's here." The back door opened, and a tall man with beautiful eyes and the bearing of a king stepped out. Everyone felt his dangerous aura. The captain approached him, and they exchanged a few words before he turned back to his squad. "Tell the medical sergeant to bring the boy," he said. A woman, her face hidden behind a white surgical mask, stepped out of the van, carrying Sean in her arms. He clung to her as she walked toward his father. When she saw who Sean's father was, her heart started pounding, but she kept her expression blank. She recognized his eyes, his lips, his perfect nose, his sharp jaw, and his cheeks. She knew he was the man she loved more than anything, the man who had suffered for years because of her. She finally got to see his face behind the mask, and it was in such an unexpected situation. Just as she had imagined, his voice was masculine, handsome, and mesmerizing, like the face of someone the gods had crafted with their own hands. Even though she had imagined this moment so many times, his ethereal appearance charmed her to the core. She didn't meet his piercing eyes. Instead, she stopped a few steps away from him and started whispering to Sean. "Your father's here," she said, but his grip on her tightened as he shook his head. "Please don't go," he said. Haley's heart shattered. She was controlling her emotions as much as she could, hoping to slip away without drawing attention to herself. But Sean's words pierced her heart. She tightened her grip on him as she felt a chilling gaze that seemed to be looking into her soul. Episode 273. Can I borrow your medical sergeant? Brad stared at the woman holding his son. It was odd for Sean to embrace a stranger like that, since he didn't even hug his father that tightly. He looked like he never wanted to let go of her. Brad's heart started beating a little faster. He couldn't see the woman's face and wondered if she was trying to hide from him. He stepped closer to get a better look. Her mask covered the lower half of her face, but he froze when he saw her eyes and brows. His cold heart felt like it had been struck by lightning, and the parts of him that had nearly died the day she had disappeared were resuscitated. Without saying a word, he walked up to her. Everyone, even Tyler, thought he would just take Sean and leave. Instead, he reached out and removed her mask. Everyone was surprised, but the person who was surprised the most was Haley. She'd been trying not to look at him, but when he took off her mask, she looked up in shock. Their eyes met, and Brad's heart, which had been frozen solid for 5 years, began to melt. Time stood still. His wife, his precious wife, was standing in front of him, and he could hardly believe it. "Am I dreaming?" he wondered. He had never stopped looking for her since the day she had disappeared. Tyler, who had been watching from the sidelines, was so shocked that he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. They had searched for Haley, and they were still searching for her, but they hadn't found a trace of her anywhere. They had infiltrated every underground organization on Earth looking for information, but it was as if she had simply disappeared off the face of the earth. Damn, no wonder we couldn't find her anywhere. Who would have guessed that she would join the military, let alone the special forces? She was so close to us all along, he thought. He shook his head in disbelief. No one could have predicted that a mission to rescue their kidnapped son would bring the couple together again. It must be fate, he thought. Then he turned to the captain and said, "It looks like he doesn't want to let go of your medical sergeant." The captain nodded. "Looks that way," he said. "If it's okay with you, I would like her to accompany Sean. I promise I'll bring her back," Tyler said. The captain turned to Haley and said, "Sergeant, you're going with the boss and his son. Then meet us back at base." Haley had to follow her captain's orders, so she got in the car with Sean still clinging to her. Brad stared at her as she caressed the boy's head. Sean dozed off in her lap. If not for him, Brad would have pulled her into his arms. Instead, he clenched his fists and kept watching. Neither of them broke the silence. They were each lost in their own thoughts. Haley didn't know what to do. She longed for him, and she wanted to hug him as tightly as she could. But when she looked into his eyes, guilt consumed her, and she thought that she didn't deserve him. If not for Sean's unwillingness to let go of her, she wouldn't have gotten into the car with them. All she wanted was for the two of them to live in peace. She remembered how Brad had suffered for 10 long years for a crime he hadn't committed. Her guilt had haunted her every day, and she would have understood if he hated her, but she only saw longing in his eyes. Because of the Thunder Squad's year-long secret mission, Haley didn't know what had happened over the past year. She didn't know that her biological father's name had been cleared and that Brad had shifted the blame to Blackleaf, nor did she know that the case had been solved and there was no need for her to hide anymore. Sean had fallen asleep in the car, so Haley picked him up. Brad led her toward his bedroom, where she put him down on his bed. She and Brad still hadn't spoken to each other. She had watched her son sleep for a while and then kissed his forehead. Her heart broke at the thought that she was leaving him again, but she felt like she couldn't stay. She left his room and walked past Brad as though he were invisible. She had only taken one step past him before he reached out and hugged her from behind. She gasped and bit her lip, her heart pounding as his arms tightened around her. She had longed to feel his warm embrace for 5 years. "Now that I finally found you, did you think I would let you go again?" he asked. Episode 274. It's over. Brad felt like his heart was about to explode. If it was only a dream, then he never wanted to wake up again. Haley, his beloved Haley, who had disappeared 5 years earlier, was in his arms again. He could feel her warmth, and the glaciers surrounding his heart melted away. With a single embrace, those 5 long, lonely years ended. He was overflowing with emotion. He wanted to hug and kiss her and never let her out of his sight again. He also wanted to be handcuffed to her, like the last time they were together, so she couldn't leave him again. I need to go back. I have to follow my captain's orders, she said. Her voice was cold, but Brad understood. 5 years earlier, he had planned to bury the truth forever because it had seemed like his only option. He had wanted to protect Haley by hiding her involvement, but everything had changed the day she had disappeared. He had been forced to reveal the truth because he had been sure that she left so that he could clear his name. He had known that she would blame herself for his suffering and that she would think that he would be free if she left. Her disappearance had made his plans possible. It had taken him 4 years to clear her father's name and blame Blackleaf because he had first needed to earn the world's trust. He had needed to build his empire and gain enough power to execute his plans. If she hadn't disappeared, none of his plans would have happened, and he would never have gained his freedom. He understood her. If their roles had been reversed, he would have done the same. He knew that change sometimes required sacrifice, and his precious Haley had sacrificed everything and suffered alone for 5 long years. He knew that they had both suffered during their separation, and he knew that her pain was worse than his. He could see the pain in her eyes as she looked at Sean, and it suffocated him. He couldn't even imagine how much she had endured to join the special forces while also enduring the pain of not seeing her son. He couldn't let her suffer a moment longer. Their long war was finally over, and they could live freely. Haley, it's over now. Everything is okay. You don't need to hide anymore. Please, come back to us, he said. His voice was hoarse and filled with emotion. She turned to him, and her eyes widened in disbelief. I know you were out on a mission, so you might not have heard yet. It's over. Your father's name has been cleared, and Blackleaf is guilty. Come back to me, to us. We've been waiting for you for so long, he said. Haley was shocked. How is that possible? She stammered. She knew that after Brad had revealed the truth, her biological father had been cursed by the whole world. Brad had never told anyone why her father had blasted the town, but some intelligence agencies knew. That was why Haley had been forced to hide inside a submarine in the middle of the ocean. How had Brad altered the truth? You're the one who made it possible, he said. Episode 275, Forgotten Emotions. Brad's eyes never left her face. He watched her reaction, and his heart ached when he saw how her eyes had changed. They used to be filled with determination and clarity, but when he gazed into them, he saw doubt, disbelief, and sadness. Her guilt weighed heavily on her. The cute, spirited Haley he remembered, the one who would have been in tears as she embraced him, seemed to have been replaced by a wary and hardened woman. He clenched his fists. He understood why she had changed. He had undergone the same change many years earlier. She had had 5 years to train herself to control her emotions, just like he had done when he was a child. He knew that she might have changed so that she could survive the pain of leaving him and their son. He also knew how extreme the training regimen was to become qualified as a Special Forces medic. He couldn't even begin to imagine the hellish training she had endured to be able to remain calm and treat patients in the most dangerous situations. A single glance told him that his angelic wife had been dragged to hell and back, and just thinking about it made his heart ache. Haley's calm expression hid her inner turmoil. When he had told her that everything was okay, her heart had started fluttering uncontrollably, and his warm arms and tight grip confused her. She knew that he wouldn't lie to her, and her heart was ready to believe him, but his words seemed unbelievable. She was also confused by her own reaction. She wanted to cry, celebrate, and hug him, but no tears came, and she remained frozen. She didn't even smile. She had thought she was just falling back on her training and suppressing her emotions, but she was wrong. The emotions that she wanted to express just wouldn't come. They were stuck somewhere inside her. Her mind was clear, but she felt like she had no control over her own body. She felt like she was living in someone else's body. She could feel the wild beating of her heart, but she seemed to have forgotten how to express the emotions she knew she should be showing at such a moment. She was scared. What's wrong with me? What happened to me? When did I get so cold? She wondered. Brad wanted to pull her back into his arms, but before he could, a vibrating sound broke the silence. She reached for her phone. He watched her as she answered the call. Every move she made revealed her training as a soldier, and her aura, which had been warm and soft years earlier, was that of a warrior. Yes, sir. Copy that, she said before putting her phone down and looking at Brad. The emotions she felt were so complex that even she had a hard time understanding them. She lowered her eyes and left without saying another word, as if she were trying to hide something from him. Tyler approached and asked, "Are you really just going to let her leave like that?" He could see Brad's clenched fist, showing his intense self-restraint. When Brad didn't respond, Tyler said, "I'll stop her." "Don't. She's confused and messed up right now. Let's give her some time to figure out what's going on," Brad replied tensely. Tyler sighed. He knew that Brad was probably the only one who could truly understand what she was going through, because he had gone through it himself. She reminds me of you when you were younger, but you were much worse. She's strong. She hasn't lost her emotions. She's just forgotten how to express them. Her body resisted. I guess she realized that, and she didn't want you to know," he said. Brad loosened his tie and took a deep breath. "At first, I thought everything was fine because of her reaction to Sean. Maybe that was her maternal instinct," Tyler continued. "Tell the general that we're coming to headquarters. I want to talk to him," Brad said. Tyler left to contact the general. A few minutes later, as they were about to leave, a flashy car pulled up, and an attractive young man with pink hair stepped out. He looked like a teen idol. "Hey, brothers, I heard Sean was kidnapped. Is he all right?" he cried as he rushed toward Brad and Tyler. "He's fine now. He's sleeping upstairs," Brad replied. The young man heaved a sigh of relief. "Owen, don't you have a live show tonight?" Tyler asked. Owen scratched his head. "Oh, it's okay. We've already finished recording, and I told my manager that there was an emergency," he replied. Tyler violently ruffled his hair. "What's up with your hair? Looks like you've tried every color in existence already. What's next? Poop-colored hair?" he asked. "What's wrong with it?" Owen said. "It looks good on me, and Brad hasn't said anything about it, so it's fine." Tyler tousled his pink hair once again. "So if Brad didn't like it, would you change it?" "Of course. I'm not going to cross him." "You little punk. Have you forgotten that I'm also your big brother? Brad, should we kick him out? He's kind of obnoxious now that he's a pop idol," Tyler complained, but Brad ignored him. "Owen, don't leave the house until I say so," he said before getting in the car. Owen nodded. Episode 276. It's my turn. Haley had just arrived at the base camp of Fort Queen, where she was welcomed by soldiers and scientists. She wondered what was happening until she saw Commander Gomez sitting with her mother. And then she understood. They had congratulated her because the research and inventions she had created a year before had been a huge breakthrough that had gained both national and international recognition. She'd even been told that the president had invited her to attend the upcoming National Honorary Awards. After the congratulatory event, both she and her mother were summoned to Commander Gomez. The commander was her father's half-brother and also the man who had protected Haley's mother 15 years previously. After the accident, Michelle Dawson had sought his help, and he had paved the way to enable her to enter the secret special forces. Afterward, he had arranged for her to be hidden under the ocean for 10 years, and then Haley had followed suit. "You may have been away for a year, so you may not have heard the news yet," he said as her mother smiled happily with pride. "Is this about father?" "I've already heard," she replied, and the commander and her mother were shocked. "Oh, we thought we would surprise you, but yes, you're free now. You are both finally free," Commander Gomez said, and Michelle Dawson gathered her daughter in her arms. "Sweetie, after so many years, we're finally free, and your father is now seen as a hero," she cried, and Haley embraced her mother quietly. "Your research has been an amazing breakthrough. The general and the president both have great admiration for you. They cannot believe that such a talented asset was hidden from sight all these years. We can now finally introduce you, the genius and national treasure, to the world," the commander announced as he looked upon Haley like a proud father. Haley and her mother retired to their respective quarters, and Haley went straight to bed after showering. As she lay on the bed, she raised her hand above her head and clenched her fist, and then stared up at the ceiling for a long time. Her thoughts were full of Brad and her son. Her heart was aching, and she longed to return home. As a Special Forces medic, she had studied psychology, and she monitored herself constantly to better understand herself and what was happening to her. She had long become used to dodging and concealing her emotions, and now she feared that she had become incapable of expressing her feelings. Inwardly, she had no desire for Brad to ever know that she had become like this, which was why she had left without a word. She had no idea how she would ever face him now. She was even incapable of smiling anymore. Everything was finally over, but for her, everything had seemed like a dream. She didn't even know how she had managed to leave that house without saying anything to her son or her husband, but she felt like she had lost herself. She wasn't the woman she used to be, and she didn't want Brad to realize that. She knew that healing this type of psychological illness would take time, but she desperately wanted herself to be fixed right now so she could properly face them and be with them. But she didn't want to present like a robot, incapable of expressing emotions in front of her beloved husband and son. She didn't want her son to see her in this sorry state. She would have to be patient. Brad was at a military headquarters speaking to one of his generals. "General, I would like to ask you to issue an order to ensure that this person quits the Special Forces," Brad said. His voice was unconditional and chilling, and it was clearly not so much a request as an order. The general knew who Brad was and couldn't actually believe that he had asked to speak to him personally. He knew that very few people had met him, and even the most powerful leaders around the world couldn't persuade him to attend any major events. "Mr. Clark, it would be my honor to grant your request," replied the general immediately. He didn't dare ask for further details, although he was curious to know why he had been chosen for the task. But don't make it too obvious. Try to have her transferred into a less dangerous department. Also, restrict her from leaving the country, instructed Brad, and the general agreed. This sergeant is an exceptional scientist. She has recently received several awards for her research, and the president has chosen her to be one of the recipients at the upcoming honorary awards ceremony. I have just spoken with Commander Gomez, and I was surprised to learn that she was a member of the Special Forces. When I asked why she wasn't a full-time scientist, he said it was her choice to join the Special Forces. The general explained, and Brad remained silent. I will release an order to transfer her to the science department, he continued. Brad just nodded before he left, leaving the general wondering about the relationship between this woman and the terrifying and powerful tycoon, and why he would go out of his way to make such a request. Brad met Tyler outside, and as they walked, he said, Tyler, let's go find a flower shop. Tyler immediately grinned. Oh, so you're going to be the one to court her this time? He asked, bursting with curiosity. I can't force her to come back right now when she's like this. She's still fighting a war within herself. I want to bring her back to me slowly. She was the one who fixed me, so I want to be the one to help her and bring her back home. Brad replied. A grave and unwavering determination flooded his eyes, and Tyler could only smile. Brad, you know that those 5 years haven't just changed your wife. You've actually changed too, but for the better. And the most amazing thing that has changed is your emotional intelligence. You've matured quite a lot in that department, Tyler commented, and Brad just stared at him. Tyler, when Ken comes back, I will send you back to Laskamar. You need to get on with your own life. It's been 5 years, and you and your fiancé are still not married, Brad retorted, and Tyler almost tripped over his own feet. Episode 277, Mom's Cooler Than Dad. The following morning, Haley was in her uniform, holding her gun as she walked toward the training area, when she saw a luxurious car up ahead. She stopped, and when the car door opened and an adorable little boy stepped out, her heart started beating wildly. He was dressed very smartly, as if he had just come from a magazine photo shoot. The boy was so cute that Haley felt her heart being tugged. She remained rooted to the spot and watched as the little boy turned and began to approach her. Mommy, you're so cool, he blurted out, and Haley's eyes widened in disbelief. She slowly fell to her knees and dropped her gun to the ground. The word mommy had hit her like a bolt of lightning. Haley slowly and gently placed her hand on the boy's shoulders to look at him, and the next moment she pulled him into her embrace. She didn't speak. She just hugged the little boy as gently but as tightly as possible. It had only been less than 10 hours since she had last seen him, yet she felt years had passed. Mommy, please tell me I'm your son, the boy pleaded, and Haley pulled away and gazed at his adorable face. Those strong-willed and honest eyes were so breathtaking, and it was melting her heart. Haley couldn't handle herself at all in front of this boy, and before she knew it, she was already kissing his forehead as she spoke. You're my one and only beloved son, she said, and she embraced him lovingly once again. Haley thought that if she was still her old self, she would have been crying hard right now, unable to contain the overflowing emotions. But she wasn't that woman anymore, and she couldn't shed a single tear. All she could do was embrace him tightly. Are you angry with Mommy? She whispered in his ears, afraid to let him go. Why would I be angry with you? He replied, pulling back and tilting his head to look at her, his little face full of innocence. Because I left you, she answered quietly. Her heart was breaking again, but the little boy wrapped his arms around her neck and hugged her. Daddy said you left because you had an important mission. You made me wait for a long time, but I'm not mad anymore, the little boy said. She just wanted to keep talking to him because when she did, she could feel her broken heart slowly mending with each word and each embrace. Meanwhile, Brad was leaning on his car, watching his son and wife hugging each other, and felt a little envious. He wanted to be with them, but he had to restrain himself if his plan was going to succeed. His wife and son continued talking incessantly, without letting go of one another, ignoring Brad's presence as if he were invisible. I'm not mad anymore, because my mommy is so cool. Daddy didn't tell me that you were a soldier, though. I want to be just like you when I grow up, little Sean said, and as Haley looked into her son's twinkling eyes, her heart fluttered like crazy. Isn't your daddy cool too? She asked to keep the conversation going. She didn't want it to end. She wanted to hear her darling son's voice for as long as possible. Yeah, Dad is cool too, but he's always holding papers. But you're much cooler because you're the one holding the gun, the little boy replied, and once again she was stunned. On the other hand, Brad felt a little dejected when he heard his son's assessment, but a part of him smiled, and a voice could be heard laughing from within the car. Who's cooler, the father with the papers or the mother with guns? Paper guns. Little Sean really knows what he's talking about, said Tyler, laughing. Brad just looked at him, lost for words. Episode 278, Plans Falling into Place. Mother and son were still engrossed in their conversation when Commander Gomez arrived. His eyes instantly fell on the handsome man leaning on a luxurious car, and he was mystified. He'd already been notified that a certain VIP had come to visit the base, but had paid it no heed, believing that the person was just some ultra-rich person who simply wanted to take a tour around the site. Wasn't this the elusive legendary monster who shut down our military base as a child more than a decade ago? The commander wondered as he looked at the imposing figure. He was shocked that he was seeing the man in person. He was almost a mythological figure. Back then, Commander Gomez had been among the top agents that the government had given the mission to capture the man with the code name Monster, but they had all failed miserably, not only once, but countless times. The monster had been elusive and mysterious, and the commander was aware of just what kind of monster this person was. Even after a decade, no one in the entire world had managed to capture him. For someone like the commander, who was among the decorated elite agents who had tried but failed, this person was a completely untouchable monster, an invincible being in his eyes. Now, seeing this man standing right in front of him, he felt tremors going up and down his spine, even though he knew he wasn't an enemy anymore. When Haley noticed Commander Gomez, she finally let little Sean go as she stood up and saluted her commander. Seeing this, the father and son looked at her with the same expression of admiration. Their eyes sparkled with extraordinary pride and honor. Sergeant, I have received word from headquarters. They are transferring you to the research department effective today. You will focus on research and development from now on. Remember that you aren't just a military asset, but also a very valuable asset to this country. So I hope you'll continue to exceed expectations. As the commander explained Haley's transfer, her eyes widened before she responded, Yes, sir. She knew there was no way she'd be able to refuse an order from headquarters. Then the commander lowered his eyes and looked at the little boy beside her. And who is this young man? He asked, and Haley was about to reply when the boy introduced himself. Hello, Commander. My name is Sean, he said. His voice was loud and clear, as though he was trying to sound like a soldier, and his confidence surprised everyone except, of course, his dad. What a fine young man you are. How old are you, little Sean? The commander asked again, looking fondly at the young boy. I'm 5 years old, he replied. His gaze and the way he talked and behaved were very disciplined and confident, and everyone had difficulty believing he was only 5. Looking at him, and then across to the powerful man standing just a few steps across from them, he suddenly remembered that this terrifying tycoon had a 5-year-old son that Special Forces had saved only yesterday. The commander had also heard that the boy wouldn't let go of his niece, so he could only assume that the little boy was here to see her. So you're here to visit the sergeant? Commander Gomez asked, and for some reason, the boy glanced back at the man leaning on the car. After a second, he returned his gaze to the commander and nodded. Commander, might I ask you to grant me a request? The little boy asked, and the man could only smile. Who would dare not grant a request from this child? Even the president wouldn't dare offend that man over there by rejecting his son's request, right? The commander thought. Of course. State your request, young man, the commander replied, and the boy's eyes sparkled. He raised his little arm and held Haley's hand. Please let me take this lady out for the day, he said in a determined and adorably grown-up voice. Everyone fell silent after hearing the little boy's request. Watching from his place by the car, Brad's lips curved into a triumphant smile, knowing that his plans were falling into place. Haley just stood looking down at the little boy, surprised by his eloquence. No one spoke until one of the soldiers standing behind the commander coughed, and everyone snapped back to reality. Of course. Actually, I was about to tell her to take a day off today, so if she's fine with it, you can have her for the entire day, the commander said, and the little boy's face split into the most dazzling smile. Haley continued to gaze at her son. She felt a little unsteady on her feet, and she thought her heart would melt at the sight of his warm and beautiful smile. She had the impulse to squeeze this adorable little guy again, and in the end, she gave in to the urge and hugged him tightly once more. Episode 279, Go and Fetch Your Fiancé. Meanwhile, Brad just stood there quietly, watching his dear wife's every move. Even though she was wearing a military uniform and her hair was neatly tied back, she remained the most beautiful woman in the world in his eyes. She was a little thinner now, but apart from that, her appearance hadn't changed much at all. However, there was one thing he badly wanted to see again, and that was her smile. Her smile had always brought sunshine to his life, and he had missed that so much. He wanted to see her smile and hear her laugh again like she used to. He desperately wanted her back to hold in his arms again, but he knew it wouldn't be easy. He understood that it would take time to heal a wound that had been left untreated for 5 years. That was why he would take the best possible route for her recovery, and if it meant using his own son to help with that, he wouldn't hesitate at all. The previous night, father and son had had a man-to-man talk after little Sean had awakened in the middle of the night. The little boy had left his room when he had realized that his mother had gone. He had been walking towards his dad's room when he saw him sitting quietly near the window. "Dad, where is she?" he had asked. "She's gone back to work. Go back to sleep. Don't worry. We'll see her again soon," Brad had replied. Sitting in the dark gloom, he had the look of someone terrifying from the underworld, but the little boy had approached him, not fazed by his father's sometimes fearful appearance. As he had looked at his father, his forehead had creased into a frown, and he hadn't looked very happy. "Why did I never see her wearing that uniform in any of the photos, including the ones Uncle Tyler showed me? Why didn't you tell me before that she was a soldier?" Little Sean had asked, and Brad had signaled him to sit down beside him. The little boy had also sighed as he had looked intently at his father, waiting for his answer. "How do you feel now that you've finally met her?" Brad had asked instead of answering the question. Little Sean had tilted his head for a while as he considered his response. Then he touched his chest and said, "When I hugged her, it felt warm here. I felt so happy. I knew right away I loved her very much." He had answered solemnly, and Brad had smiled and ruffled his hair. This son of his was just like him when he had been young. His intelligence was far more advanced than his years, and he didn't act or speak like a child at all. But little Sean had some characteristics that Brad hadn't possessed when he had been his age. Unlike him, little Sean was curious about everything. His interest in everything around him was so overwhelming that he wouldn't hesitate to flood everyone around him with countless questions every day. That was the reason why little Sean had been able to easily understand and express what he had felt when he had met his mother. "Good. Tomorrow, we'll visit her at work. Go back to sleep," Brad said, but the little boy's forehead had creased once again. "But Dad, you haven't answered my question yet," he had said without moving. He had looked up at his father expectantly, and it had been unlikely he would return to his bed until his father had provided a proper answer. And Brad knew his son, and he knew he wouldn't budge until he had received a satisfactory response. "Because I wanted to surprise you. Why? Don't you like her being a soldier?" he had asked, and little Sean had stared at him for a while before he had shaken his head. "I think it's cool, but isn't her job too dangerous? What if..." Little Sean had paused as worry had flashed across his big, beautiful eyes. As he saw this expression, Brad had raised an eyebrow. "I'm a little disappointed that you think so little of me, my son. Did you really think your dad wouldn't have done anything to change that yet?" he had asked, and the little boy had tilted his head again to the other side. "I just wanted to make sure," he had said, and Brad's face had turned a little dark. "Are you saying you don't trust your father?" he had said, his voice a little cold. But the boy had remained calm as he had answered him honestly. "Of course I do, but you're so busy," he had answered, and Brad had been left speechless. "Also, Dad, the teacher said tomorrow is our school's family day. She wanted to call you, but I said I wanted to be the one to tell you," he continued, and Brad's eyes had lit up when he had heard this news. "Little Sean, how about you invite your mother to attend the family day?" Brad suggested, but the truth was he had already formulated a plan, and his son would be the one to execute the first step. "Can I?" the boy had exclaimed, and excitement had immediately filled his eyes the moment Brad had nodded. Tyler had been nearby and had overheard the conversation between father and son. Who would believe that this duo would be plotting a scheme in the middle of the night? They look and sound like soldiers discussing strategies together, he had thought in wonder. Brad had explained his plan, and the little boy had nodded in understanding, utterly focused on what his father had told him. After their heart-to-heart, the boy had dozed off on his father's lap. "Hey, I can't believe you would actually resort to using your son," Tyler had said as he had appeared, smiling mischievously. "There's nothing wrong with that. Besides, 2 heads are better than 1, Brad had said as he had carried his son back to bed. "I didn't say it was wrong. In fact, I think it's a great idea. Little Sean might even be a better healing balm to her than you," Tyler had said as he had thrown Brad a teasing smile. "Why don't you go back to Lascamar and fetch your fiancée? I'm sure Haley would be happy to see her," Brad had said before he had walked away. Tyler had turned to look out of the window into the night. His eyes had begun to sparkle with wild anticipation at the thought of seeing his fiancée again. Episode 280, The Beautiful Family. Brad thought about the conversation he had had the previous night with his son, and he felt proud. His son had performed beyond his wildest expectations. "Brad, did you teach him that line?" Tyler asked from the driver's seat of the car. He was the designated driver that day. "I just told him to try his best to make her come with us," Brad answered, and Tyler chuckled. Hey, Brad, do you think your son is a natural-born Casanova? Do you realize that his pickup line and choice of words was such a breath of fresh air? If he weren't such a cute little child, anyone would think he was trying to hit on her, asking her out for a romantic date or something, Tyler said as he laughed gleefully. Brad contemplated what Tyler had said, and he thought that maybe his son had gone a little overboard. He hadn't expected him to call his mother a lady as naturally as he did. He was lost for words, so he just stared at his son. Meanwhile, after the conversation with the smart little boy, the commander considered approaching Brad when he received an emergency call and had to leave urgently, and so he missed the opportunity to meet the most elusive man on earth. Once little Sean and Haley were left alone, the young boy turned to his mother again. "Mommy, today is our school's family day. Here's the invitation. Will you come?" he asked, looking at his mother with his big, cute eyes, imploring her to accept. Haley kneeled down again. She took the invitation, but instead of reading it, she embraced her son once again. She buried her face in her son's shoulder, holding him, inhaling his scent, afraid to let him go. As he watched them, Brad felt a great heaviness in his chest. He could see the guilt etched on her, the guilt of leaving her beloved son for so long. Brad then stepped closer to them. He didn't want her to feel like this anymore. He wanted to tell her that there was no reason for her to carry such a heavy burden alone, and that he would always be there to support her. But he understood her reaction, and knew that it would not be easy to drive away the negative emotions she had been carrying all this time. So he didn't say a word. He just lifted his hand and gently placed it on her head as though telling her that everything was all right now. Haley felt the hand softly caressing her head. She didn't look up, but the familiar warmth soothed her, and she felt as though he was trying to share her pain. But she felt it was more than she deserved. "Mommy, are you all right?" little Sean abruptly asked because he suddenly sensed she was unhappy. "I'm sorry. Can you let me hug you just a little longer?" she asked. Her voice was so soft and quiet that little Sean looked at his dad. Seeing his daddy encouraging him to comfort her, little Sean raised his little hand and gently stroked his mother's back. "You can hug me as long as you want, Mom," the little boy replied, and Haley held him as tightly as she could. A short while later, the family of three climbed inside the car. Haley continued to hold on to her son, leaving Brad unable to make any moves on her at all. But he wasn't disheartened, because his main plan for the day hadn't even started yet. Later, the little family arrived at Sean's school. For the family day event, the school had asked the parents and their children to wear matching costumes. So everyone was there wearing all kinds of colorful, funny, fancy dresses. The event had already started when the Clark family showed up. Their arrival had caused quite a stir, and everyone stopped to look and gasp. "Oh my gosh, who are they?" "The only ones who haven't arrived yet are little Sean and his parents, so I think they might be them." "Really? Have you seen little Sean's parents before?" "Nope, they've never come to school before." But anyways, look at those costumes. What a beautiful family. They look so cool, and all three of them look so mysterious. God, I really want to see the faces behind the masks. His parents look young, especially the mom. Even with those masks, I can already tell that they're damn good looking. They are little Sean's parents after all. The parents continued murmuring about the family who had just arrived. The school hadn't been informed about the arrival of Mr. Clark, and they were clueless about the kidnapping that had happened yesterday. Moreover, they hadn't even realized that their student, Sean Clark, was actually the son of the infamous powerful tycoon, Kevin Clark. Brad, Haley, and little Sean were wearing matching black masks. It was the same design as Brad's mask 5 years ago. Brad and his son were wearing matching black and gray tailored suits, while Haley was wearing an exquisite white dress. They looked exactly like an elegant royal family attending a masquerade party, and nobody could take their eyes off of them. Episode 281, Rival for Affection. There were a series of performances from other students before the time for Sean to shine finally arrived. The gorgeous masked little boy went on stage to play a piano piece, and Brad heaved a sigh of relief. His son had monopolized his wife the entire time, and he was beginning to feel like a bodyguard on the sidelines rather than a member of his own family. Once his son was on stage, he was finally alone with his wife. He was very careful because he didn't want to do anything that could disrupt her good spirits. Although she was sitting right next to him, she didn't seem to notice him as her attention was focused entirely on the young boy up on stage. Her eyes were locked on her son, and she didn't even appear to blink. It was as if she was afraid that if she did, the little boy might vanish in the split second that her eyes were closed. Brad tried to get his wife's attention. He called out her name, but she seemed to have placed an invisible barrier around her with the words, "Please don't disturb me. My son is about to start playing the piano, and I want to give him 100% of my attention." For the second time that day, Brad felt a little dejected. As soon as Sean started to play, Haley became immersed in her own world inhabited by only herself and her son. She obliterated everyone and everything else from her mind. As the melody drifted around the room, her eyes started brimming with happiness, and she threw her son loving gazes as she silently encouraged him. She had not felt happiness like this for 5 long and empty years, and this showed in the anxiety that was also visible in her eyes. Brad rested his face onto his knuckles and fixed his gaze on her. The longer he looked at her, the more he desired to hold her in his arms. He desperately wanted to be intimate with her again, kiss her beautiful lips, hold her hands, and embrace her just as they had 5 years before. The song Sean was playing had made everyone in the hall feel emotional, and at the same time, astounded by the genius talent in a boy only 5 years of age. Haley began to feel the emotion of the song. It seemed to illustrate exactly the feeling she was experiencing right then, the so-called sorrow of love, because while her heart was bouncing with happiness, at the same time, sadness seemed to be lodged in her heart. But as she continued listening to the music, despite the pain and sorrow in her heart, it felt as if it was being mended slowly by the warmth and love her little boy was trying to convey. It was as if he were playing that particular song to free them from the anguish and emptiness they had all felt as a result of their separation. She didn't realize it, but she was holding her breath. Brad had been watching her closely and noticed the conflicting emotions his wife was wrangling with. He instinctively reached over to hold her hand. He hesitated for just a second as he checked Haley's reaction, but he didn't withdraw. Instead, he squeezed her hand gently, trying to convey that everything would be all right. To his delight and relief, he felt his wife squeeze his hand in return as she exhaled gently. Even though he knew that Haley was engrossed in their son's performance and could very well have been completely unaware that she was holding his hand, Brad's heart somersaulted anyway. He was holding her hand once more and felt that love was within his grasp again. He was surprised that he felt the same as he did 5 years before, where a simple touch from her could cause chaos in his heart. Hand in hand with his wife again, Brad's heart was jumping for joy, and his whole world seemed to brighten up again with that simple gesture. His eyes were glistening with emotion. "It's been 5 long years since I last felt like this," he thought. In Brad's world, Haley was the only woman in his eyes. It had only ever been her. But this blissful moment ended abruptly when little Sean's performance came to an end, and Haley pulled her hand from his so she could applaud. Pride and happiness flooded her eyes, and although she wasn't smiling, her eyes radiated bliss. He was disappointed that he no longer held his wife's hand, but grateful that they had taken the first step. But what happened next shattered his cool demeanor. Little Sean walked off stage as the audience continued to applaud, full of admiration for his impressive talent. As he approached his mother, he held out a single red rose. Then Brad watched as he stepped closer to her and said the words, "I love you, Mommy," before he gave her a peck on the cheek. Brad felt like he had been struck by lightning, and his whole world seemed to collapse around him. He couldn't believe what was happening. When did Sean plan all this? Is he purposely doing this to compete with me or something? Thought Brad. Episode 282, Tyler's Interference. Haley was so touched and impressed by all the things her son had done. Her heart was overflowing with happiness, and she held him tightly and kissed his cheeks in gratitude. "I love you too. I love you so much. Please forgive me for leaving you," she whispered softly in his ears. Her heart felt a mixture of both happiness and pain, and she felt like it was about to burst. She wanted to cry, but still, no tears would come. "Mommy, I understand why you left. I was sad, but the only thing that matters to me is that you're here with me now," the little boy said. Haley just held him even tighter. Her son was such an adorable, sweet little boy. Every word he uttered was helping her mend her fractured heart. Holding him and hearing his heartwarming assurances made Haley feel that even after all the agony and pain she had suffered in her life, the world was somehow still beautiful, and life was still worth living. Meanwhile, Brad was beginning to exude a decidedly frosty aura, cold enough to make anyone nearby know something was seriously wrong. Everyone, of course, except the people closest to him. His wife and son were completely wrapped up in each other and completely oblivious. Brad took a few deep breaths, regained control of himself, and his dark aura slowly returned to normal. Later that day, their small family had finished their lunch, and Haley had excused herself to go to the restroom, leaving father and son sitting quietly across from each other. "So when did you plan all that?" Brad asked his son, but little Sean just tilted his head to one side as he looked at his father with a bewildered expression. "What? Oh, the rose and the kiss? That was Uncle Tyler's idea. He told me that once Mom gave you a rose and a peck on the cheek, so I thought I'd do it for her," he replied truthfully. This news did not please Brad, and he struggled to control his dark thoughts again. "So, this is all Tyler's doing, is it? Why did you decide to do that?" Brad asked casually, as if he were simply making conversation. Because I heard it was Mom who courted you, even though it's usually the other way around. Usually it would be the man courting the woman. Somehow, I felt bad for Mom, so I decided I'm going to work hard to court her to make her come back home. Little Sean answered without any hesitation. Brad was speechless. He didn't know what to say or how to feel after hearing what his son had just told him. And Dad, I'm sure you have your reasons why you would want to take it slow, but I'm scared. What if Mommy disappears again? The little boy continued in a small voice. Worry and uncertainty flashed across his face, and Brad just lifted his hand and messed his son's hair. Then he said, "So, when did you stop trusting your father?" Brad asked as he looked at his son coldly. But Sean, who was used to his father's temper and occasional coldness, hardly noticed. It's not like that. It's just that Uncle Tyler told me you're like a laggy computer when dealing with anything concerning Mom. That's why he asked me to lend you a hand and do something to help you fast-track it. Sean answered innocently, but with wisdom and understanding beyond his years. Brad's aura was now becoming very dark and very cold. Tyler, he thought furiously. He was about to try to say something to redeem himself when Haley returned, prompting father and son to act like nothing had happened. A short while later, Haley and little Sean went into one of the classrooms to take part in an art event together, which was limited to one parent per child. Brad decided to go outside, and he saw Tyler waiting in the car. When Tyler felt the icy cold greeting Brad gave him, he knew right away that Sean had given the game away. Tyler opened the door and climbed out of the car. "Why are you here? Don't tell me you walked out because you can't contain your jealousy of your very own son," Tyler asked, grinning mischievously. "I will admit I'm feeling a little jealous, but for the sake of my plan, I'm allowing Sean to monopolize his mother today." Brad replied smoothly, and Tyler raised an eyebrow. "Oh, really?" was all he could say in reply. "Anyway, I wanted to speak to you, Tyler. Ken is here now, and my wife is back, so you're free to do whatever you want from now on. You should start focusing on your own life now. You can leave tonight," Brad said, his tone serious, and Tyler understood why he was saying this to him again. But he just leaned back against the car and put his hands in his pockets. "Okay, I'll leave tonight and bring Amy back with me when I return," he said. "Just go and ask her to marry you already. If you need help or advice on the subject, you can always ask me," Brad said. "Why would I ask you for help? You can't even get your wife to come home yet." Tyler shot back at him. For a moment, Brad was lost for words. Then he raised his head and gazed at the sky as he said with conviction, "I will make sure I bring her home tonight." Episode 283, Phoenix from the Ashes. As the event was coming to an end, Haley visited the restroom. She was still inside the cubicle when she heard voices gossiping about her on the other side of the door. "I wonder what's wrong with Sean's mother." "Yeah, you noticed too? I know her upper face was covered with a mask, but I never saw her smile. It makes me wonder what her problem is. She didn't smile once throughout the entire day." "That's what I'm telling you. Her son is so adorable and so clever, and she kept hugging him, but she didn't once smile." "Yeah, if I were her, I would have been beaming with pride and smiling the whole day if I had a genius kid like that." I agree. No matter what her reason, as a mother, she should at least smile and show her son that she's happy. Yeah, right? She looked gorgeous, and you can see how beautiful she is even with the mask. But I wonder whether her son was bothered by it at all. I'm sure he was bothered. He's a genius, after all. He's not like our naive children. That's for sure. There was some laughter, and then Haley heard the woman leave the restroom. Haley felt her heart breaking apart. She gritted her teeth and clenched the front of her dress with her fist. She knew they were right. There was no way little Sean wouldn't notice that she didn't smile. These people were just speaking the truth, but their words made her hate herself. As his mother, she shouldn't be like this. She should be able to show her son how happy she was, how happy she made him. She should be able to show him a bright smile as she embraced him, and she should be able to laugh with him. On their way home, Sean had dozed off while sitting on Haley's lap. Brad could tell that there was some strange emotion in her eyes as she kept staring at her son while caressing his hair gently. She had seemed preoccupied ever since they had left the school. When they had finally reached the Clark residence, Brad had offered to carry the boy inside, but Haley had insisted she do it. She had carried him into the mansion, while Brad had remained outside by the car, watching her walk away. He leaned lazily on the luxury car with one hand in his pocket as he lifted his face toward the dark sky. He was still wearing his mask as he stood there quietly, gazing up at the stars. An hour went by, and Haley finally stepped out of the house. Brad looked over to the door and saw her, and when their eyes met, she stopped. She was about 10 steps away from him, and Brad's heart began to flutter. Seeing her standing there in her white dress, with her familiar, long dark hair, and her delicate features that Brad had missed so badly every moment, for the past 5 years was like a dream come true. He felt he couldn't ask for anything more. She was so beautiful, and he just wanted to gather her up in his arms again. But he didn't move a muscle. He just stood there quietly and gazed lovingly at her, and he had to gather all his self-control to overcome his desire to walk over to her. Now there was nothing but silence between them. Another long moment went by, and it almost became too much. He was about to surrender to his impulses when the woman finally moved. As soon as he saw her take a step forward, Brad's lips curved into a small, uncertain smile. This was it, the moment he had been waiting for all these years. The woman in white slowly walked toward him, and Brad's Adam's apple bobbed up and down as he straightened up in anticipation. He felt that she was finally going to decide to face everything again. Brad had never believed that she had changed for the worst, and he had always hoped that she was still the same strong woman he knew and loved. From the very start, he believed in her. He knew that all she needed was a little awakening and reassurance, and she would definitely rise again, like a phoenix from the ashes, no matter how deep the abyss into which she had fallen. That was why, all this time, Brad hadn't done a thing. He hadn't made a move. He fully believed in her 100%. He knew that she would do anything for her son, just as she had done for him before. He believed that her fiercely instinctive maternal love and desire to give her all as a mother would be a great force to push her up and awaken her will to rise again and survive. As he looked into her eyes, he saw something unfathomable. Her beautiful eyes were glimmering with something Brad couldn't decipher. 5 years ago, her eyes had always been filled with strong determination and unwavering spirit, no matter what had happened. But there seemed to be something different this time. It was as if his delicate angel had turned into a fierce and intense warrior. Brad was sure that this was the strength and spirit she had gained while serving in the military for years, combined with her natural courage and compassion. He didn't know why, but the intensity in her eyes was effortlessly disrupting the rhythm of his heartbeat. The woman stopped when she was one step away from him, but Brad still didn't utter a word. He was waiting for her to speak first, but the next second, the intensity in her eyes weakened, and she lowered her head as though she was trying to hide her face from him. It was as if a storm that had been brewing had disappeared in an instant. Brad was surprised by the sudden change, but before he could do or say a thing, Haley raised her hands and tugged on his sleeves. Her head was still bowed as she finally broke the silence. "I have something to say," she said. Her voice was soft and filled with sorrow. "You can tell me anything. I'll always listen," Brad replied. His voice was encouraging and as gentle as ever. "I'm sorry," she uttered, and Brad's face darkened. He didn't expect that to be the first thing she would say. "There's no reason for you to be sorry," he said, his heart tightening. "But I was the reason you suffered," she retorted, and Brad finally snapped. He held her face in his hands and made her look at him. "You're wrong. We are the same. We are both victims. We both suffered. They are the only ones to be blamed for everything bad that has happened in our lives. Haven't you already sacrificed enough for me? We have both suffered for each other's sake. So please, stop blaming yourself. Stop feeling guilty. Nothing was ever your fault. Do you understand?" He stated all this firmly and honestly. His voice was powerful and it pierced straight through her heart. His words were soothing and heavy, and Haley had to accept every word he uttered, as if his words were all she could or would believe in this world without question. Many times before, she had wrestled within herself, trying to reason out the same words Brad had just said to her. However, she always had a hard time believing the thoughts in her own head. She felt guilty and responsible. But now that it was Brad saying these words, her heart and mind instantly surrendered and succumbed to what he told her. This made her realize once again that this man still held the key to her redemption and recovery. Episode 284, The Best Cure. Haley bit her lower lip. She wanted to cry. It had only taken Brad a few words to make her fully understand their predicament and for him to convince her that he had never blamed her for anything. She lifted her hand and touched the hand with which he cupped her face. "But I was the one who broke my promise. I left you, and I left my son. I fell apart and let guilt and fear defeat me. I wasn't strong enough," she said, her voice full of sorrow. She was hurting so much, and yet, still she couldn't cry. Brad listened and looked into her eyes, full of pain and sadness. He felt all the hurt she was feeling, along with the rage growing inside him. He had sworn to protect this woman, and he felt the urge to destroy everything that had made her suffer. He kissed her forehead firmly before looking deep into her eyes again, gently caressing her cheeks. "Listen, it may be true that you broke your promise and left us, but if you hadn't left, the world would still be hunting me down, preventing us from being together. You made all this possible. You sacrificed yourself so that I had the opportunity to put everything right. Do you understand?" he explained. She looked into his eyes, saw the raw emotion, heard his heartfelt words, and it rendered Haley speechless. He was providing the salvation she had been seeking. She had been desperately trying to find justification for her actions, to help relieve her of her guilt for leaving her husband and son behind. She had been looking for vindication and proof that she hadn't been a coward or a cruel mother for abandoning her son. She had been searching for this during the entire 5 years she had been absent, and she couldn't believe that she had finally found it, that just a few words from her husband would have the power to release her from her never-ending nightmare. She was so overcome with emotion that she threw herself into Brad's arms and hugged him as tightly as she could. Brad gasped, but immediately hugged her back even tighter. He felt as though he had finally won back that which was more important than life itself. There was a hint of a smile on his lips, and his heart felt like a volcano about to erupt with joy. The wait was finally over. He could finally hold her in his arms again, and he couldn't even begin to describe how he felt. He was beyond happy, as though he was floating above the clouds. He felt that their separated worlds had once again become intertwined. They stood molded for some time, holding each other tightly, unwilling to let go. And then Brad tried to kiss her. But before his lips touched hers, her hands held his face and stopped him. He couldn't hide his disappointment or desire. He had been longing to taste her lips again after what had felt like 1,000 years of separation. Then Haley spoke. Brad. She said his name for the first time in 5 years, and the word struck him like a bolt of lightning. 5 years ago, he would have been frozen in place, but not anymore. Hearing her voice call his name now, he only felt a surge of love. What is it? Do you have something to tell me? He asked gently as he tried to set aside his desire. I have a problem, she admitted, and Brad finally relaxed. This was one of the things he was waiting for her to confess. I'm listening, he said, and Haley bumped her forehead against his chest. I can't smile or cry anymore. I saw a psychiatrist and was told that it might take time for me to recover. And she wasn't certain how I could do that, but... Her voice trailed off and she looked into Brad's eyes again. This time Brad secretly smiled inwardly because he finally saw the determination and fighting spirit in her eyes again. Those were the eyes of the woman that had helped him 5 years before. The eyes of the woman who had never given up on him and had always been determined to give him her everything, unconditionally. But I do want to get better as soon as possible. I want to smile for my son. I want to laugh and cry again. She continued with increased conviction, and Brad could no longer conceal his happiness. He smiled brightly at her, and Haley was dazzled by his beautiful expression. Did you know that a psychiatrist is useless for this kind of affliction? He asked with a meaningful smile that Haley had never seen before. When we first met, I couldn't smile either, but because of you, I was able to smile again. He continued, and Haley's mouth hung open in confusion. Because of me? She asked, looking at him with both wonder and disbelief, as if she was trying to remember what she had done to make him smile again. Yes, the answer is actually quite simple. Come back and live with us now, and I promise you will start to heal in no time, he said, and suddenly he held her around her waist and leaned her against the car, and there wasn't an inch of space between them. Episode 285, Summoned Back to Camp. Haley's feelings had been in chaos. The words Brad had uttered had been like a mystical, powerful chant that had lifted her curse like magic. She had felt like she was dreaming, and she could still hardly believe it. She had never once thought that everything could be solved so quickly and easily. What Brad had achieved with his words was beyond her comprehension. And when she had heard him claim that he would make her smile and laugh and cry again, that he would help her quickly, she had been bewildered. She had not realized what Brad was doing, how he was feeling, nor was she aware of how close their bodies were. All she knew for certain was that there were green shoots of recovery in her world, and she felt that soon there would be light, life, and color in her life again. She started reminiscing about the person she used to be 5 years before, and she imagined herself smiling and laughing in Brad's arms, loving him unconditionally. All the missing fragments of her life had started to slot back together. She looked at Brad, and her heart began to recall just how much she had loved him back then. He had been her entire world, and she had been willing to do anything for him. She remembered just how cute and adorable he had been, and she felt nostalgic as she looked at his eyes with his upper face covered with a mask. Brad was holding her wrists and wanted to remove her hands from his face so that he could lean forward and kiss her, but Haley wouldn't let go. Brad, I want to see your face, she said, and Brad remembered that he was still wearing the mask that he had worn as part of his costume. I'm sorry, I forgot to remove it, he said, and he raised his hands to take it off when Haley stopped him. Allow me, she said, so Brad let his hands drop to his sides. Only then did Haley let go of his face and take hold of his mask gently. She had avoided eye contact with him ever since the first time they had met near the huge fountain. She still couldn't picture his face in her mind very well, because the Brad in her mind had always been the Brad wearing that black mask. She began to lift his mask, her heart fluttering like crazy, and she felt as if she were seeing his face for the first time. As she slowly revealed his face, her heart was racing. The face that she had not been permitted to see for so long was truly beautiful. It was so perfect and sublime in her eyes, the kind of face that it should be forbidden for a mere human to possess. Haley pushed him back a little so she could admire him. Afterward, she raised her hand and pinched his cheek. "So, this is the real Brad," she said quietly, and Brad smiled, which was almost too much. Her eyes widened and her lips parted in wonder, seeing her beautiful Brad, without his mask, and smiling his once rare smile, filled her with such joy. And her reaction made Brad feel both relief and happiness. He could finally see his wife shining through, coming back to him. While Haley remained in a dazed trance, Brad couldn't wait a second longer and pulled her toward him once again. But before he could move in to finally kiss her, Haley's cell phone rang. She immediately snapped back to reality and pulled her phone from her pocket. She answered the call immediately, and Brad sighed in disappointment while he rested his hand on top of the car. She spoke into the phone, sounding efficient and businesslike, and Brad waited. Although she was not in uniform, she sounded cool and possessed, and Brad was reminded that his wife was a soldier of the elite special forces. She concluded the call and looked again at her husband with an apologetic look. "The commander has summoned me back to camp," she said with regret, and Brad straightened. He didn't utter a word, but Haley hadn't forgotten what he said a moment before, that he would help her if she returned home immediately. Haley didn't want to be separated from her family anymore. Now that the chains around her heart were finally unlocked, she didn't want to listen to the demons inside her any longer. She didn't want to remain a slave to her own fear and foreboding. All she wanted right now was to be with her husband and son again. She saw the disappointment written all over her husband's face. "I will return right away," she assured him, and when he heard these words, he smiled and she was once again mesmerized by his exquisite loveliness. He moved closer to her. "I'll let you go if you kiss me," he said, and Haley almost choked. She felt her face turn red hot. Throughout those 5 long years, Haley had never once thought about this kind of thing. She had kept herself busy and hadn't given herself even a single minute to reminisce about her life with Brad and about things such as kissing. In other words, she felt like it was too sudden and that she wasn't ready because she felt as though her experience had reset back to 0. 5 years was a long time, and she was afraid she might have even forgotten how to kiss. "Can I kiss you when I come back? I'm in a bit of a hurry," she said, trying to buy herself some time to think about it, when suddenly Brad gently bumped his head onto hers. "I'm sorry, but I can't wait anymore," he murmured, and he leaned in toward her, and their lips finally touched. And just like that, all the love and passion that they had shared and that had been lying dormant for so long was awoken and released once more. Episode 286, A Strong Drug. Brad broke away and looked at Haley. Their lips had barely touched, but he was already starting to lose his mind. He leaned in to kiss her again, but was interrupted by a voice calling out, "Mommy!" Haley turned and ran toward the source of the voice, and Brad scratched his head and watched her go. She ran to the door where she reached out and hugged Sean. "Mom, are you leaving again?" he asked. His hair was messy, but he still looked adorable, especially with his beautiful eyes welling up with tears. He looked like he was about to start crying, so Haley patted his head. Her heart tightened. "Don't worry, I won't leave. I'll be by your side from now on," she said. His eyes widened and he let go of her and looked into her eyes. "You're going to live with us from now on?" he asked, and she nodded. "Mm-hmm. I just have to go back to work for a little while to sort things out. I'll come back right away," she said. Sean's eyes sparkled with joy and he hugged her again. "Go back to sleep. I'll take your mom back to work," Brad said. Sean looked displeased at being sent away. "I want to come too. Mom said it's just for a little while," he said. His parents looked at each other in defeat. A minute later, all 3 of them were in a car heading toward Port Queen. Sean sat in Haley's lap and he was fast asleep when they reached the point. Tyler had just arrived in Lascomar when he got the message about the whereabouts of his fiancée, whom he hadn't seen for 2 years. Amy had become a successful author, and she had even launched her own chain of bookstores all over the country. Everything she had accomplished was because of her own hard work. She had succeeded even without the support of her family. Tyler had tried to limit their attacks on her, but that was all he had done. He had felt that facing and overcoming obstacles on her own would make her stronger. Their relationship hadn't changed. For the previous 5 years, she had lived freely while he had been busy fighting alongside Brad. They didn't have much of a bond. They were simply a couple whose marriage had been arranged by their families. They did have a mutual understanding of the other's situation, though, and despite their distance, Tyler had never completely forgotten about her. Without even realizing it, he started worrying about her when he got the message. He reached the hotel that she was spending the evening at. He had been told that one of her books had been adapted by a film company. It was another successful accomplishment for her, and she had been invited to the premiere. It was already midnight, and the hotel was almost empty. He looked around, but he didn't see her. He asked someone to check the hotel's security camera, and he learned that she had last been seen going into a restroom an hour earlier. An hour? Tyler asked as his forehead creased. He felt a bit restless, and he remembered that every time he had seen her, she had been in some sort of trouble. Worried that something had happened again, he walked toward the restroom she had been seen entering. His eyes widened when he heard male voices coming from the women's restroom, so he went in. "Hey, lady, open the door and play with us," a drunk man said as he knocked on the door of one of the stalls. "Come on out, Amy. That drug in your drink was pretty strong, so there's no use trying to resist it. Come out and we'll make you feel better. My little brother can't wait much longer," the other man said. His words and tone of voice were filthy. Tyler was overcome with rage when he heard him say her name. A few seconds later, both men were lying on the floor bleeding. Amy, who had been sweating and trembling inside the stall, heard the brief fight, but she still didn't dare to open the door. The voice she heard a moment later made her shudder. "Amy, you can come out now," the familiar cold and deep voice said. She gasped and then covered her mouth as her eyes widened in shock. What's he doing here? She wondered. Episode 287, Move Away from the Door. "Amy, come out now," Tyler said, his voice echoing in the restroom. Amy was startled and a little scared. She knew the voice, but she had never heard it sound quite so terrifying. He sounded furious, and she knew that when he sounded like that, his anger was almost lethal. The year that Haley had disappeared, Amy had stayed to help take care of Sean. She had learned a lot of secrets about Brad, but she had also learned a lot about her fiancé. She had been shocked to discover that her handsome fiancé and the ordinary bodyguard were the same person. She had felt betrayed and deceived, and she had been angry at him for tricking her. She had also seen how ferocious he could become. 2 years earlier, during the downfall of the Hughes family, she had gone back to attend Sean's birthday party. She, Owen, and Sean had been riding in Tyler's luxury car, with Tyler driving, when a group of fighters, who appeared to be working for the Hughes family, had ambushed them. Amy had been terrified and had tried to shield Sean. Dozens of people had surrounded them, breaking the car's windows with bats and pieces of metal. Amy had thought that it was the end, but Tyler had done something unbelievable. He had calmly gotten out of the car, and she had watched him fight them single-handedly. He had turned into a seemingly inhuman monster, crushing them like ants. She had seen the fury in his eyes, and in just a few minutes, he had defeated them all and stood among their broken bodies like a ferocious but victorious warrior. That day, Amy had seen another side of him, and she had been both awed and dumbstruck. She had realized how little she knew about him, and had waited for him to talk about it, but he never did. It was as if he hadn't wanted her to get to know him, and it had made her question their relationship. Since that day, nothing had changed between them. She had tried to understand his circumstances, and they had both decided to go their own ways. People had been surprised that they hadn't just canceled their engagement because they spent no time together and hadn't gone on a date since the first day they had met. "I'll give you 3 seconds before I break the door," he said, interrupting her thoughts. She was alarmed, but she forced herself to speak. She didn't want him to see her in her current state. "No, don't. I'm fine," she said, but her voice sounded weak and forced. Tyler's eyes narrowed. He said, "Move back. Move away from the—" "Stop!" using every ounce of the little energy left in her. "If you open the door, you'll regret it," she said. His eyes narrowed even more. "Leave me alone. I'll come out when I'm ready. If I see you, you'll be in trouble. You'd better run," she said, her voice echoing. Her words set off a red flag in his mind. He had been so angry, and the two men had been so drunk, that he hadn't fully understood what they had been saying. He had only heard a few sentences, and the only thing that he remembered them saying was her name. He had no idea what she was talking about. "Don't make me repeat myself," he said. Then he heard what sounded like her falling to the floor. He grabbed the doorknob to prevent the door from swinging as he slammed his shoulder into it. He slowly pushed it open, and his eyes widened when he saw Amy squatting on the floor and looking up at him. Her hair was wet and disheveled, and she was drenched with sweat. The straps of her red dress had fallen off her shoulders, and her eyes were wild. Tyler froze for a moment, but he quickly recovered and squatted next to her. "What's going on? Did those guys do anything to you?" he asked. His eyes were blazing with anger, but Amy weakly shook her head. He heaved a sigh of relief. Then what happened? Don't tell me you had too much to drink, he said. She weakly raised her hand and covered her eyes. Why didn't you listen to me? Didn't I tell you that you'd be in trouble if I saw you? You shouldn't have shown me your beautiful, seductive face, she said. Tyler's veins popped. Seductive? Okay, you really are drunk. You were in danger. What the hell are you doing getting yourself into trouble like that? Do you know what would have happened to you if I hadn't come along? He said as he moved her hand away from her face. Their eyes met, and she bit her lips seductively. I'm not the one who's in danger here. You are. There's no way I can resist you. Get away from me, you beautiful thing. I don't want to see you. I'd much rather see Mr. Ordinary right now, she said. Tyler's veins popped again when he heard that she preferred his boring masked face to his own gorgeous one, but he started to feel his temperature rising. Her voice, the sweat on her face and neck, and her lustful gaze were getting to him. Stop it. We're leaving now. Sober up, Miss Inappropriate. Then we'll see what happens, he replied sternly, averting his gaze as he helped her to stand. As soon as he touched her, she whispered softly to him, This is your fault. Don't say I didn't warn you. Before he could respond, she started kissing his neck. Episode 288. Stop the car. Tyler felt electrified when her lips touched his skin, but he grabbed her shoulders and pushed her away. What are you? He began, but he couldn't finish. He felt his body responding to her lips and her lustful eyes. His heart started racing, and his mind warned him of impending danger. He was immune to any kind of seduction. During and after his training, he had never lost control around anyone, and had always been able to stay focused. Amy was the only exception, as he had discovered twice before. He didn't understand how she could break through his defenses, but he accepted that she was capable of driving him crazy. Behave yourself, he said. He picked her up and carried her out of the restroom. She wrapped her arms around his neck and kept kissing him. He stumbled. Stop that. We're almost to the elevator. She didn't stop. Instead, she reached up and pulled his face toward her so that she could kiss his lips. Tyler was starting to lose his mind, and he was glad that her grip seemed to be weakening. Kiss me, she muttered, but he just gritted his teeth and walked faster. There were a few people in the hallway. He looked down at her and said, I told you to behave. People are watching. Do you want me to drop you right here? Because I will. She kissed his neck again, ignoring his threat. Sweat was starting to form on his forehead. He realized that she wasn't listening, so he walked even faster. They reached the elevator. As soon as the doors closed, he put her down on the floor and pushed the button for the underground garage. He wanted to yell at her, but she grabbed him, wrapped her arms around his neck, and kissed him. His eyes widened. He saw that hers were closed. Feeling her heat, he gave in and kissed her back. Their kiss was as deep and passionate as ever. She kissed him like there was no tomorrow, driving him wild. They parted just long enough for him to catch his breath. He opened his eyes, but she kissed him again, more forcefully. He felt her fingers running down his back, and his mind grew cloudy. Just as he was reaching for her, he heard someone clearing their throat. He opened his eyes and saw that the elevator doors were open. An elderly woman was standing outside them, and covering the eyes of the little girl standing beside her. He broke off the kiss and quickly carried Amy out of the elevator. They made it back to his car. He placed her in the back seat and then slammed the door closed. He took several deep breaths and ran his fingers through his hair, trying to regain his composure. He knew he was sweating hard, and he knew that he was past his breaking point. Even though he knew that she wasn't herself, he could barely control himself. One of his men approached him and said, She was drugged. We talked to the server who brought her drinks, and she told us that somebody asked her to put an aphrodisiac in her glass. It was tasteless, so Miss Amy didn't notice it. Tyler's face darkened with anger. Find out who's behind it, he said coldly, before turning back to the car and opening the door. When he saw Amy breathing heavily and banging her head weakly against the window, he clenched his fists. He got in and sat down next to her, closing the door behind him. He looked at her and she opened her eyes. Even though he knew about the effects of aphrodisiacs, he wasn't sure how to help her. He didn't want to take advantage of her. When his driver arrived, he said, Let's go. The car started moving, and so did Amy. She crawled toward him, and a second later, she was sitting in his lap. He was stunned, but he pushed her away before she could kiss him. He flicked her forehead. Look at me, Miss Inappropriate. Do you know who I am? He asked, trying to distract her. You're so beautiful, she replied, putting her hand on his face. He was about to flick her forehead again when she bit his finger. His eyes widened, but she kissed him before he could stop her. He cursed himself as he kissed her back. A few minutes later, his voice rang out inside the car. Stop the car and get out, he said. The car immediately stopped and the driver stepped out. Episode 289, Giving In. As soon as the driver closed the door, Tyler grabbed Amy's shoulders and pinned her down. They were both panting after their passionate kiss. His mind had gone blurry, and he had reached the limit of his self-control. His grip on her tightened as he saw her flushed face and disheveled hair. "Amy, do you really think I'm different from those other guys?" he asked. His jaw was clenched, indicating that he might lose control at any second. "Do you think I can resist you when you're acting like this? Do you really have such a high opinion of me?" he continued, trying to maintain control of himself. He would be all over her if she had been sober, but he knew that she wasn't. He could smell the alcohol in her breath and taste it when he kissed her. He realized that she was not only drugged, but also drunk, and that realization was the only thing holding him back. She licked her lips as though she hadn't heard or understood what he had said. He wished that she would just fall asleep. "You aren't like them. I want you," she said seductively. "How do you know I'm not like them?" he asked, holding on to the last bit of rationality left in him. "Because you're so beautiful. I just want to eat you up. I'm sorry, but I can't control myself anymore." "You're just too irresistible," she said. Tyler's veins popped. "Damn it, Amy. What are you talking about?" he thought. He was starting to get angry. He was trying so hard not to do anything that he knew he would later regret, but she wasn't making it easy for him. "Seriously, Amy, I'm just like every other guy you've met, just flesh and bones and uncontrollable desires. But you're drunk. Someone drugged you, and this is not going to happen right now," he said. His gaze was dangerous. Amy didn't back down. "You're not like them at all. You're the only one I want," she said with a mysterious twinkle in her eyes. Her words were like oil on a fire, but he called on his training and resisted the look in her eyes. He had never thought that one day his desires would overpower him. He had never understood how everyone, even Brad, seemed to lose control of themselves and let logic and reason fly out the window. He had never experienced that loss of control and had always been able to regulate his own emotions so that he could think straight. His brain had always seemed robotic, and even in life and death situations, his thoughts had remained rational. He had doubted that he was capable of normal human emotions, which was one of the reasons he had agreed to sign up for seduction tolerance training. Then Amy entered his life. In the car with her, he finally realized that he was capable of losing control. If she had been acting this way and sober, he knew he wouldn't be able to resist her. The thought was unsettling. Episode 290, A High Dosage. Tyler let go of her and sat back in his seat. The clouds in his mind began to dissipate. He looked at Amy in disbelief. He called her Miss Tramp because of the way she had always behaved around him, but he didn't believe that she was acting like herself right now. "We're not doing this now, Amy. Not like this," he said, straightening his shirt. He felt her arms around him again. She started kissing the back of his neck, and he shuddered and bit his lip. He turned back to her and saw that she was completely disheveled. He tried to fix the strap of her dress, but she nibbled his earlobe. "Don't stop. I want you. Please let me have you," she said seductively. "Damn it!" he yelled. "Stop it!" "You're upset?" she asked. He could see her energy fading, and he knew that she was a mess. He spoke to her more gently. "I'm not upset. I just don't want to take advantage of you when you're like this. If we keep going, I know I'll regret it." He remembered what she had said the first time he had met her. She didn't like men who gave in too easily to seduction. With that thought in his mind, he was sure that something awful would have happened if they had kept going. He was angry with himself. Even though there had never been any love in their relationship, he had grown to care for her. He hadn't expected it and had initially thought that she had just fulfilled a necessary role in his life, but she had become important to him. As he sat with her in the car, he started to think that he had fallen for her. He wasn't sure if what he was feeling could be what everyone called love, but he liked her a lot despite how annoying and troublesome she could be. "Tyler," she muttered, drawing his attention back to her. She had all sorts of silly nicknames for him, and she called him Mr. Clark in front of other people, but she had never called him by his first name before. The self-control that he had just regained wavered. "Please, I can't stand it anymore. I want you," she said. He resisted, but then he realized her predicament. The drug was still in her system, and its effects were torturing her. He guessed that the dosage must have been high. She looked desperate, and he didn't want her to endure the torment. He sighed, pulled her close, and caressed her face, hoping to help her relax. "I can't do what you want me to do tonight, but just close your eyes. It'll pass soon," he said in a soothing voice. "Mm-hmm," she said, and nodded weakly. He shifted to a more comfortable position and ran his hand up and down her back. Her head was pressed against his chest, so he focused on slowing his breathing and heart rate, hoping her body would take its cues from his. Once he was sure she had fallen asleep, Tyler slowly and carefully laid her down on the back seat. She was limp and exhausted. He wiped the sweat from her forehead and watched as she fell into a deep sleep. He covered her with his coat and then opened the door to call the driver. "Take us to the nearest hotel," he said. A few minutes later, he laid her on a bed in a hotel room and took a cold shower. Episode 291. How Many Kisses? It was midnight when Haley left Sean's room. She was on her way to change her clothes, but she stopped when she saw Brad sitting quietly on the couch and looking out the window. He was as still as a portrait, and he wasn't wearing his mask anymore. She could see how alluring his face was. When she thought about everything they had gone through, it all seemed like a dream. All her suffering had been worth it, if this was her reward. The man that she had waited for so long to see was sitting in front of her, and everything she had wished for had come true. She'd always believed that as long as there was love in the world, everything would work out in the end. It was a cruel world, but they had endured years of pain and were together again under the same roof. Brad was lost in thought. He was thinking about the proposal he had planned 5 years earlier. He still had the ring he had bought, and he couldn't wait to give it to her. He remembered the night when she had told him she loved him, and he could still feel the emotions he had felt that night. It was his turn, and he wanted to sweep her off her feet. He remembered what she had said the night before he had left her, and he swore to himself that he would grant that wish. He wanted them to do everything they hadn't been able to do before. He was so focused on his plan that he didn't notice her admiring him until her sweet voice called his name softly. "Brad," Haley said as she stepped in front of him. He looked up at her and was surprised that he hadn't noticed her approach him. "Hey," he said. He couldn't finish. As soon as he saw her, his heart skipped a beat. He saw the intense longing in her eyes and reached out for her hand. Before she could say anything, he pulled her toward him, wrapped his arms around her waist, and buried his face in her stomach. She was stunned for a few seconds, but then she wrapped her arms around his head. The moonlight shone brightly on them as they hugged each other tightly, capturing their unconditional love. Haley stroked his hair the way she used to before their separation. She felt a heartwarming nostalgia. "I miss you," she said. He pulled her down and sat her on his leg. She was surprised, but before she could recover from the shock, he pressed his lips to hers. He held her waist tightly. His warm lips touched hers, and when her body relaxed, he delved deeper. After so many years apart, they finally shared another intense, passionate kiss. Brad had felt like a chained monster for so long, but as he kissed her, he was released from his chains. Words couldn't describe how much he had missed her. Their kiss lasted several minutes, but he still wanted more. He kissed her again and again until she finally pulled away, gasping. "You've gotten better at that," she said, her face flushed. She hadn't thought very carefully about her words. She had just said the first thing she could think of, so that she could distract him long enough to catch her breath. Instead of being flattered by her praise, Brad felt troubled. "I haven't kissed anyone else since you left," he said. Haley blinked. "Then how did you get so good?" she asked. She was delighted, but also curious. Brad hesitated, and she blushed when she realized how awkward her question had been. She thought he would ignore the question, but instead he answered almost immediately. "Simulation?" he asked. She tilted her head. "Huh?" she said. "I practice kissing you in my dreams," he explained. She almost choked. Is that even possible? She wondered. He kissed her again, exploring her mouth with passion and hunger. They parted to catch their breath, but their faces were still so close that they each felt the heat of the other's breath. She started to speak. "Brad, I'm sorry, but I want to make up for the kisses we've missed for the last 5 years, he said. Her eyes widened and he kissed her again. 5 years? How many kisses is that? Will our lips last? She thought, but she kissed him back. Episode 292, a bolder version. Brad was in heaven. They had been kissing for several minutes already, but he couldn't stop. The warmth of her lips and the sweet taste of her mouth were like drugs that had no antidote. His heart overflowed with joy. She was irresistible and he couldn't get enough of her. He laid her down on the couch and ran one hand down her back while the other hand played with her hair. Time froze, and he imagined that they had never been separated. It seemed like he had just told her to wait for him the previous day. Haley opened her eyes when she felt Brad's body on hers. She saw that he had laid her down on the couch. She felt the heat of his body, and she moaned as his lips moved down her neck. Then she gasped. "Brad, wait!" she said, but he didn't stop. "Brad!" she repeated. The second time she called his name, he stopped. They stared at each other, breathing heavily. We're in the living room," she said. Her face was red and her eyes flitted around the room. She was clearly flustered, but Brad was oblivious. He looked at her with longing. It's okay. There's no one here, he said. She was shocked. He leaned in to kiss her again, but she stopped him. But still, this is the living room. Someone might... Before she could finish, he kissed her. Don't worry. If anyone comes in, I'll cover your body, he said. Haley's face burned. She raised her hands and covered her face before he could kiss her again. She couldn't believe what he had just said. She had expected him to feel at least a little embarrassed. She thought that he had forgotten where they were in the heat of the moment, but when she reminded him, he was still unconcerned. What's happened to him? Where did his self-consciousness go? She wondered. His kisses were already overwhelming her, and she didn't know how to handle his unexpected boldness. Her budding experience with romance had ended the moment she had left 5 years earlier. She hadn't thought about romance at all the whole time, so she had stagnated. Brad, you're really bold now. You used to be so shy. You're not as cute anymore, she complained, keeping her hands over her face. He paused, and his eyes darkened when he saw how upset she was. He guessed that she wasn't ready, and he understood. He sat up. I'm sorry. Maybe I'm too impatient. If you're not ready, No, it's not that, she said. I want you, but we're... She froze and blushed, realizing what she had just blurted out. Brad ran his fingers through his hair. Hearing her say that she wanted him made him happy, and saying such things out loud no longer fazed him. He flashed his sexy smile at her. She was speechless. He moved closer to her. He didn't speak, but the look in his eyes was enough. She relaxed again, and he wrapped his arms around her. I'm sorry. I didn't realize you were uncomfortable here, he said. Are you okay here? She asked. Yes, as long as there's no one around. Brad, you've changed so much. Don't you like me like this? I think I prefer the awkward Brad. This version of you might give me a heart attack. He paused, curious about what she had meant. Was I really that awkward? He wondered. He was just about to ask her when he heard a voice behind them. Hey, bro, I'm home. The pink-haired young man froze when he saw a woman in Brad's arms. Episode 293. Not so little anymore. Owen was stunned, and his heart sank. He never would have imagined his sister's loyal husband holding another woman in his arms. His eyes widened, and he turned to leave. He had thought that Brad would wait forever to be reunited with Haley. Wait, Brad said. He stopped, but didn't turn around. Does this mean that you're tired of waiting for my sister? Didn't you say you would wait for her and marry her again? He asked. Then he heard a voice that jolted him. Owen? The familiar voice said. He turned and looked at the woman, and his eyes widened. Haley? He said with disbelief. She ran to him and hugged him tightly, and he teared up. Is it really you? You're back now? He asked. She nodded, and they hugged each other again. Yes, it's really me. Owen, I'm sorry I left. You're so tall now, she said. Her little brother wasn't so little anymore. He shook his head. I understand why you disappeared, so please don't apologize, he said. Big brother here told me everything. I can't believe you're back. Where have you been all this time? He was so emotional that Haley's heart fluttered, and she wanted to cry with joy. She had been reunited with her brother, one at a time. Everyone that she loved was coming back to her, and she felt blessed. When she had been in hiding, she had known that either Amy or Brad would take care of Owen. She had planned to ask Brad about him, but because of what had happened, she had completely forgotten. I'm so glad you're all right, she said. Brad, who had been watching them quietly, turned and climbed the stairs. He knew that he would have to wait until another time. He understood how much she had missed her little brother, and he knew that they needed some time together. He would have plenty of time with her later. Something that Owen had said stuck in his mind as he walked toward his study. He did plan to marry Haley again, and thinking about it reminded him of the heartless terms of their marriage contract. When he got to his study, he found the contract that they had both signed almost 6 years earlier. As he stared at it, his expression darkened. He took the papers with him and quietly walked to the courtyard. He strolled across the garden and stopped at the corner of the courtyard. The gardens and courtyard at the Clark residence were similar to those of Gray Mansion, but the flowers weren't as beautiful as the ones Haley had planted. He thought about them as he took a lighter from his pocket. He stared at the contract for a few minutes. There were so many pages that he had to separate them. He set the first page on fire and watched with delight as the flames consumed it. He had always wanted to destroy it and replace it with the real declaration of love. He felt elated, and he looked like the happiest man on earth. When the first page was reduced to ashes, he grabbed the second page and held the lighter to it. Then his phone vibrated. He saw that it was Tyler, so he answered immediately. Hello, Brad? Yeah, what is it? Brad replied. What are you doing? Tyler asked. Brad knitted his brows. He and Tyler only called each other for business or emergencies, so it was strange for Tyler to call and ask what he was doing. And since they were around each other all the time, they never needed to ask. He remained speechless. Hey, talk to me. Tell me why you called or I'll hang up, Brad threatened. If you hang up on me, I won't bring my fiancé back. Brad kept setting the pages on fire, one at a time. He asked, "Is that a threat?"
Only if you want her help. Don't hang up on me.
Brad gave in. He knew that if he sent his forces to retrieve Amy, Tyler would annihilate them. Tyler was the only person he could never control by force. "What is it?" he asked. Tyler said,
Answer my question. What are you doing right now?
They took turns, with Brad being evasive and Tyler being persistent. Tyler repeated his question several times without getting a clear response. Finally, he said,
Damn it. Why is it so hard to answer a simple question? What are you doing?
"I'm burning something," Brad finally replied. The questions and evasive answers continued.
What are you burning?
There was no response.
What are you burning? Tell me, damn it.
Brad sighed, but the questioning continued.
What are you burning? If you don't tell me in 1 second, I'll...
"Papers," he finally replied, prompting another question.
What papers?
He remained silent.
What papers? Damn it, Brad. Why are you so hard to talk to on the phone? You have 1 second.
"Tyler, I think there's something wrong with your head. Maybe you should call a doctor." Tyler yelled.
Shut up. What papers are you burning?
Finally, Brad told Tyler what he was doing. The marriage contract. Episode 294. No proof. In the corner of the courtyard, Brad squatted on the ground. He held a cell phone to his ear with one hand and set another page of his marriage contract on fire with the other. The call had interrupted him, and he looked annoyed enough to smash his phone to pieces. "I'm burning my marriage contract," he repeated through clenched teeth. Nobody but Tyler had ever dared to threaten him or speak so forcefully to him before. And if anyone else had tried, he would have deployed his special forces to destroy them. But Tyler, his trusted right hand, could get away with it.
Your marriage contract? The one from 6 years ago? You're burning it?
Tyler yelled. He sounded shocked, and Brad couldn't figure out why he was getting so riled up. "Mm-hmm," he replied as he held the lighter to his marriage license.
And your license? Your certificate?
Tyler asked. "Mm-hmm," he replied again. There was a moment of silence, and then Tyler sighed.
Don't you think it's a bit too soon for that? Remember how you destroyed all records of your marriage in the civil registry when you left her? You know that the only proof that you two are married now are those papers that you're burning, right?
He asked, his voice filled with disbelief. Brad scratched his head. He had, in fact, destroyed all the records, but only because he had known that the police would investigate her. He had done it to protect her. "I got them illegally, so it's okay. I'm burning them because I'm going to marry her for real, and we'll have genuine documents. I don't need these ones anymore," he said. He heard a sigh.
But it means that you're not married to her anymore.
"What?" he said. Tyler said,
Has your brain frozen now that she's back with you? If you destroyed the only proof of your marriage, you can't prove that you're married. You didn't even have any witnesses or pictures of your wedding, remember? You're not legally married anymore.
Brad's eyes widened. He stood up and tried to stamp out the flames, but it was too late. He stared at the ashes on the ground and froze. His face darkened as though his spirit had left him, and he looked like a statue that was about to crumble to pieces.
Hey, are you still there?
Tyler yelled through the phone. "I messed up," he said. He couldn't believe what he had done. He hadn't thought of the consequences of burning everything. He had only wanted to get rid of the old contract so that he could remarry her. But as he stared at the ashes, he realized that he should have waited until the day of their second wedding.
What are you going to do now? She's not your lawfully wedded wife anymore,
Tyler said. When he got no response, he kept talking.
You're a mess right now. Nobody would believe that you and the feared Kevin Clark are the same person. Really? Only Haley can make you turn your brain off like that.
It sounded like he was enjoying teasing Brad. Tyler knew how upset he was, though, so he limited the teasing and tried to help.
You're already planning to remarry her, so it doesn't really matter. You just need to wait until your wedding day to call her your wife again,
he continued. He got no reply.
Okay, if you can't wait that long, then just hack into the civil registry again, he said. You're powerful enough. Haley doesn't ever need to know about any of this.
Brad finally replied, "No, I swore I would never do anything unethical or illegal again. Not when it comes to her." He sounded firm. Tyler sighed even though he had expected that response. He said again,
Okay then, what? Are you going to take her to the courthouse tomorrow and get married again?
Episode 295. Why are you still up? Brad fell silent. For 5 years, he had wished that he could go back in time and redo their wedding. He knew that he couldn't change the past, so he had sworn to himself that he would get it right the second time. He would wait at the altar as she walked down the aisle. They would experience the joy that every couple experiences on their wedding day. Everything would be perfect, and they would remember the day for the rest of their lives. Imagining their perfect wedding helped him calm down. He took a deep breath, and his clenched jaw loosened. He knew there was no point in regretting the past.
Are you still there? Answer my question. Are you going to marry her tomorrow?
Tyler asked. Brad leaned against a wall. That wouldn't be right, he said. He wanted to do it quickly, but not that quickly.
So, does that mean you're going to follow all the traditional steps?
He replied firmly. I want everything to be proper this time. Tyler said mischievously,
Since you want to do it properly, you can't sleep with her until your wedding night. You know that, right?
He got no reply, so he kept talking.
Well, it is proper. But I'll understand if you ignore that part. I know you've done without for 5 years, and you already have a child with her anyway. Don't worry, I didn't hear a thing.
Brad imagined how wide Tyler's grin was as he teased him.
So, what are you going to do? What's your first step?
Tyler asked. Brad didn't respond. It was his turn to ask questions. Tyler, what time is it there?
3 a.m. Why?
Why are you still up? Brad asked. He heard Tyler cough.
I just had a really strong coffee, so I can't sleep.
When did you start drinking coffee?
Tonight, actually. I wanted to try it.
Tyler?
Really? That's the truth.
Brad remained silent.
It's the truth.
Brad was about to reply when he heard Tyler sneeze. Not just once or twice, but 3 times. His brow furrowed. He knew how strong Tyler's immune system was. He could go for years without catching a cold. He only got sick when he spent hours outside in cold rain. Are you sick? Brad asked.
I think so. I spent too long in the show.
Brad interrupted him. You're with her right now, aren't you? Good. Bring her back tomorrow.
How did you?
Tyler started to ask. And Tyler, take some advice from your big brother. Don't forget that you're not married yet. Be a gentleman. Brad hung up with a smile and took a deep breath. He put his cell phone back in his pocket and looked up at the dark sky. He couldn't wait to put his plan into action. He went back inside and into Sean's room, and there was Haley, just as he had expected. She was asleep and had her arms wrapped around their son. He sat on the bed and watched her for several minutes. He remembered how much he had loved watching her sleep. Her calm face soothed him and warmed his heart. He leaned over, caressed her face, and kissed her. His eyes glowed, but there was no lust in them anymore. He was happy just to have her back with him. His heart was so full of joy that there wasn't room for anything else, not even desire. He kissed her forehead again and then lay down beside her. She was spooning Sean, so he wrapped his arms around her and spooned her. Every night for 5 years, he had lain awake in bed, counting sheep for hours before falling asleep. That night, he fell into a blissful sleep in a minute. It was a beautiful sight. The 3 of them, snuggled up together and sleeping soundly in each other's arms, were a perfect family. Episode 296, Mommy Sandwich. The next morning, the rising sun shone through the window, enveloping the room with a warm light. It was a bright and lovely morning. Of the 3 people sleeping soundly on the bed, Haley was the first to open her eyes. Her eyelids opened and shut again as the light from the window temporarily blinded her. She didn't move for a while, but eventually, she slowly opened her eyes again. She blinked as she stared at the ceiling, and her brows creased a bit. She remembered that she had climbed into bed with Sean the previous night, so she was about to tilt her head to look at her son when she realized that there were arms wrapped around her stomach. She immediately, but carefully, tilted her head to look behind her. She gasped, and her eyes went wide. She was surprised to find that she was in the middle of an adorable sandwich. In that instant, she felt a warm glow enveloping her. She turned her head toward Sean and couldn't resist the urge to kiss his adorable cheek. Her son was just so cute. His beautiful, thick lashes, red lips, and his facial features were exactly like Brad's. He was a mini version of him. She could have stayed like that watching him sleep for eternity. Haley kissed Sean's forehead for the second time before she slowly turned toward Brad. She felt nervous, but the instant her eyes fell on his gorgeous face, her heart was thudding wildly. 5 years ago, she had found him cute and adorable while he was sleeping like this, even though he had worn his mask. But now that there was no mask on his face, she couldn't resist the urge to gently caress his face. He really was handsome. His flawless face and gorgeous eyes were simply beyond words and left her speechless. He looked so vulnerable when he slept, and she recalled how he had changed. He had been so inexperienced and adorable 5 years ago. That man was nowhere to be found now. Despite that, she was happy that he was still this cute when he was asleep. Haley's heart was dancing with happiness as she savored every second of them lying together. She felt like she was dreaming. Her two men were right here beside her, and she couldn't ask for more. She felt like her once dark world had now turned into rainbows, full of flowers and love. Haley lay there for a long while, savoring this feeling, not getting tired of alternately looking back and forth between the little and big men she was nestled between. Finally, Brad opened his eyes. He blinked, and his eyes immediately fell on the woman beside him. Haley turned her head towards him, and their eyes met. She was surprised to see he was awake. The morning greeting she wanted to say seemed to get stuck in her throat. "Good morning." Brad was the first to greet her with a warm smile. It felt heavenly to hear him say those words to her. She was caught off guard when he moved in for a kiss. It only lasted for a few seconds, but it had shocked her, and her eyes were wide when he pulled back. They stared at each other for a while. Then Brad kissed her again. Haley felt like Brad sucked all her energy, and she couldn't react. He finally let go of her lips again. Haley's face was now tomato red, and she still couldn't speak, while Brad, on the other hand, seemed unsatisfied and hungry for more. He moved in again for another one when Haley heard Sean moan, causing her to instantly turn her back on Brad. "Mommy," Sean uttered as he opened his eyes, and Haley, who was still as red as a tomato, forced herself to speak. "I'm here," she said as she held him, while trying so hard to calm herself from Brad's advances. Haley couldn't believe that the innocent, sleeping Brad would suddenly turn shameless as soon as he opened his eyes. Meanwhile, Brad, who had just realized that Sean was beside her, raised his hand and tugged his messy hair. He had been lost in the moment as soon as he saw her. He just couldn't resist kissing her, even though he was still half asleep. He seemed to be acting on reflex. Brad pushed himself up to lean against the headboard. Sean saw him and glared at him. "Dad, why are you sleeping in my bed?" he asked, looking grumpy. "I won't let you monopolize her," Brad nonchalantly replied, making Haley choke. She coughed multiple times, and father and son instantly looked at her worriedly. "Haley, are you all right?" "Mom, are you all right?" they asked simultaneously, with almost the same expressions, which caused her to cough some more. She was sure that this father and son duo would soon give her a heart attack. "I'm fine," she said as she tried her best to calm down. They helped her sit up and then both caressed her back. Once she seemed okay, they simultaneously jumped out of bed and spoke over each other. "I'll go get water." "I'll go get water." Again, they spoke the same words at the same time, causing them to pause and look at each other. Watching this unfold in front of her, Haley coughed again. "God, these two are killing me," she thought. Episode 297, Competing for Attention. "Sean, stay with your mom," Brad said as he looked at his little son meaningfully before he strode toward the door in a flash, as though he was showing his son that he couldn't compete with him yet. "Wait, I'm really all right." Before Haley could finish her sentence, Brad had already left the room, leaving her with no choice but to sigh. She started to get up when Sean came back to her. When she took in the disappointed expression on his face, she stopped in her tracks. He looked as if he had just lost an important battle. "Mommy, I'm sorry I'm not being useful. But don't worry, I will grow up fast and have long legs too like Dad, so I can run fast. I'll be even faster than him and be a big help to you," he said, his face pouting and his voice full of hope. She felt as if she might explode from the cuteness on display in front of her. "Oh my God, my baby is so cute when he pouts," she wanted to scream. Instead, she knelt on the floor and pulled him in for a tight hug. His dejected look only served to make him more adorable, but she was surprised that he felt defeated by his father and didn't feel useful. "What are you saying? You're already a big help to me, just by staying here with me, so don't say sorry, okay? Sean, you're like medicine for my heart, so don't ever say you're not being useful, you understand?" Haley assured Sean as she gently rubbed his head. Hearing her words, Sean nodded, and his grip on her tightened. After a while, the little guy loosened his grip, and his gloomy look seemed to have faded. "Also, you don't have to be in a rush to grow up, okay?" she said. Sean tilted his head. "Why?" he asked with innocent curiosity. She was silent for a minute as she considered her answer. Because if you grow up fast, you'll also lose your cuteness. You'll become just like your dad, who isn't cute anymore. You'll become handsome instead," she answered. It was the first answer that had popped into her head. She didn't want her baby to grow up just yet. She wanted him to stay cute and small a little longer. "So Mommy prefers cute over handsome?" Sean asked expectantly, and Haley flinched before she nodded her head like a rattle. "Of course. I love my cute baby the most because you are the cutest in the world," she replied. Sean's mouth opened as the stars in his adorable eyes exploded. He looked extremely ecstatic as he lovingly embraced his mother. Meanwhile, the handsome man in question had heard Sean's last question and Haley's heartfelt answer. He remained rooted to the floor outside the bedroom door. He was holding a glass of water for Haley in his hand, and he watched mother and son embrace. He knew he no longer had Haley's exclusive attention. Watching himself be dethroned by his own son from the position of most beloved in her life left him with a sour taste in his mouth. Thankfully, the two finally separated, so Brad walked toward them. "I brought you water. You should drink this," Brad said, and the two raised their heads and looked at him before Haley slowly stood up. "Thank you," she said gratefully before she gulped the water. A little while later, Haley went to the bathroom, leaving father and son sitting quietly on the couch. They were silent and unmoving, both wearing the same stoic expressions that would only change once their son reappeared. There was a massive gap between them, as though they were in a cold war with each other. Brad was the first to break the silence. "Sean, I have something to tell you," Brad said. Sean immediately turned his head toward his dad. He could tell in one glance that his dad was serious, so Sean looked at him intently, showing him that he was ready to listen. "Let's go talk in the study," Brad said as he stood. Sean's brows creased in confusion, but he did as he was asked and followed his father. He knew better than to act stubbornly when his father was being this serious. He was also very curious about what his father was going to say that required them to go to another room and speak privately. Inside a quiet and spacious study, father and son sat across from each other, staring quietly, waiting for the other to speak. "Dad, what is it?" This time it was Sean who broke the silence. "How do you feel now that your mother is living with us again?" "Happy, extremely happy." "Do you want her to stay with us forever?" Brad asked. "Of course. Is that even a question?" "Are you willing to do everything to make her stay?" "Absolutely yes," Sean said without hesitation. "Are you willing to cooperate with me?" "If that's what it takes for Mommy to stay, I'm willing," Sean answered seriously. The questions and answers were fired and answered rapidly. Sean had become accustomed to this kind of questioning from his father, and he responded honestly while his father was always direct. Brad didn't believe in beating around the bush. Good boy, Brad said as he ruffled his son's hair. Sean just looked up at him with a puzzled face. Dad, is there a problem? The little guy asked. Brad glanced at him before he answered. Yes, there's actually a huge problem. Episode 298, Forming Alliances. There's actually a huge problem, Brad uttered. Sean's face became even more serious. He looked at his father intently, as though he couldn't wait to hear the problem, while Brad scrutinized every change of expression on his son's face. After setting the right atmosphere to spill the beans, Brad continued talking. Sean, your mom and I aren't legally married anymore, he said. The little boy blinked before his curious eyes dilated with shock and disbelief. Truth be told, Sean knew almost everything about his mother. From the beginning, Brad had instilled in him that he had a loving mother who would soon be coming back to them. Brad had also told him stories about her, telling his son just how lovely and sweet she was, as he had reminisced about the past. Sean had treated his father's narrations as a heartwarming bedtime story. Of course, one of the biggest contributors to his knowledge about her was his gossiping Uncle Tyler. Sean had also grown up treating all information about her like something precious, not only because his father had set that example for him, but also because when they had talked about her, their conversations had been filled with loving words and memories. And it made Sean feel happy. He knew that he and his father both loved Haley very much, so he was shocked to hear this news from him. Why? How did that happen? Sean asked. His eyes looked troubled. All the documents from our marriage were destroyed, Brad answered. Destroyed? Who destroyed them? He exclaimed. Brad glanced out the window for less than a second before answering his son without hesitation. A formidable enemy, he said, and Sean stood in front of him with a displeased face. Dad, how could you let your enemy do that? You're supposed to be the most powerful man, yet you failed to protect something so important, Sean exclaimed. His eyes were overflowing with disbelief when Brad placed his hand on his son's head. It was an inevitable accident, and I assure you, it will never happen again. Never, he assured his son. This seemed to calm Sean a little. Your mother doesn't know about this yet, so you must keep it a secret, he continued when Sean puffed his cheeks. He looked at his father with great disapproval. I don't want to hide anything from Mommy. Besides, even if you're not her husband anymore, I will forever be her son. This is your fault anyway, the little guy retorted, but Brad wasn't fazed. He just looked as though he had expected his son to answer him this way. He then bent and looked intently into his son's eyes. Well, that's true. But Sean, if your mother was to learn about this, she would leave the house because she does not legally belong to this family anymore. Yes, you will forever be her son. But listen, if she leaves us and she finds another... Brad choked and paused. Even though he was just saying this to coax his son, to make him his formidable ally, he still couldn't imagine his wife with another man. He couldn't even make himself say it. However, for the sake of his plan, Brad swallowed air and continued explaining. If your mother was to marry someone else, what do you think would happen to us? Brad asked. Sean fell silent for a while, thinking about what his father had asked. Mommy will have a new family and... Father and son looked at each other with the same expression. They remained there unmoving and speechless for a long while, looking as though just thinking about their beloved finding someone else would destroy their world. Dad, please do something, Sean finally said. He panicked and reached out his hand to tug Brad's sleeve. He looked helpless, and for the first time in his life, he was begging his father for help. Brad took a deep breath. He hadn't expected to feel extremely anxious about the idea of his wife marrying another man. The very thought of it was like envisioning the end of the world. Thankfully, Brad managed to get a grip on his anxiety. He held his son's shoulders and looked him straight in the eye. "Sean, I swear to you that I will never let that happen. Never," he assured his son. Sean saw the terrifying and determined look in his father's eyes, and it awakened his fighting spirit. The two of them stared at each other, forging an alliance, silently agreeing over our dead bodies. Episode 299, My Boy is a Genius. "I already have a plan, but I need your cooperation," Brad continued. Sean looked at his father with complete trust as he agreed without hesitation. "I will do my best to cooperate with you, Dad. So please tell me what I should do. I will do everything to ensure Mommy will be ours forever," he swore with intense determination. Brad looked at his son proudly. He had known that he would get this response from his son. "Good," Brad said as he gently ruffled his son's hair. "Actually, the biggest reason why your mother returned to us last night was because of you," Brad continued. He watched Sean's eyes sparkle, but what Brad said the next seconds extinguished the sparks in his eyes. "But that's not enough. We have to make her our legal family again, to make her stay with us forever." "So you're going to marry her again?" "Yes, but to make her say yes, I need to woo her," Brad said. Sean tilted his head as he looked at his dad with a puzzled face. "Dad, does Mom not like you anymore?" the little guy asked. Brad fell silent for a few seconds. "It's not like that, son. It's just that I feel that her heart isn't exclusively mine anymore. And you are the one who took more than half of her heart away from me," Brad answered his son silently. The truth was, he was telling Sean all of this so that Sean would understand that he needed to give his parents a bit of space and time to be alone together. Brad needed some time alone with Haley so he could win her over. Of course, Sean was part of some of those ploys, and he needed his son's backing and participation for the plan to succeed. He wasn't above manipulating the situation to get it either. Brad's silence made Sean worry. Sean knew his father only became silent like this when he was unsure of his answer. So Sean decided that what he had asked might be true. This troubled him because he was sure that the answer was bad news. "I think it's because we were separated for too long that her love for me cooled down," Brad finally replied as he stared out the window. Sean became a bit restless. After Sean thought about this for a few minutes, he came up with an idea. "So, if you spend more time with her, her love for you will return again, right?" he exclaimed. Brad secretly smiled as though those were the words he had been waiting for the whole time. "You don't disappoint, son. You really are a genius," Brad thought with pride. "I guess I need to make her love me again, like before, so she might agree to marry me again," Brad said. Sean looked at his father, his eyes full of fighting spirit. It reminded Brad of how Haley had looked at him when she had been trying to make him want her. "Dad, rest assured, I will help you spend more time with her. I will give her to you for now, but once the wedding is over, it will be my turn to spend time with her. Do we have a deal?" Sean offered the compromise while looking at his father seriously. Brad stuck out his fist. "Okay, we have a deal," he agreed. Sean raised his small fist and bumped it with his father's. In an instant, the atmosphere between father and son changed dramatically. The Cold War was over, and the two were now formidable partners in crime. "Dad, do your best," Sean cheered his father on, making Brad smile. "I definitely will. Just don't forget to back me up when needed," Brad replied, and the two smiled at each other meaningfully. "I promise. I will be your very useful backup," Sean stated firmly. Brad quietly heaved a sigh of relief. He looked as though he was in extreme bliss because he had finally acquired the greatest ally in the world. "Don't worry, son. I won't disappoint you," Brad said as he ruffled his son's hair again. Sean motioned for his father to come closer. "Dad, I have some advice," Sean whispered. Brad raised an eyebrow in response. "Mommy told me she prefers cute over handsome. I'm afraid one of the reasons why she doesn't like you anymore is because you're too handsome and not cute anymore. Why don't you try becoming cute in front of her?" His son's words left him speechless. Episode 300, Lessons from a Little Boy. "Sis, I'll be back immediately, I promise. After my performance, I'll come home right away," Owen said as he looked at Haley with sad eyes in the living room. As one of the country's top idols, he was scheduled to perform a live show. There was no way he could back out, so he was anxious to attend and wrap it up quickly. "It's fine. I won't disappear, so you don't have to worry. You have an obligation to your fans, and you should go and enjoy your show. Take your time and make your fans happy, okay?" Haley replied. Owen opened his mouth to say something, but the sight of Brad and Sean walking down the stairs holding hands caught his attention. The sight of them reminded him that he didn't need to be in a hurry to come back. Haley could spend some much-needed and overdue time with her husband and son. "I understand, sis," he said as he hugged his sister and said goodbye to Brad and Sean. Once he was gone, Sean ran to Haley and she lifted him. The butler called them for breakfast, and she carried her son to the table. As they were finishing breakfast, Sean sidled up to his mom. "Mom, today is Saturday, so can the three of us go out?" he asked. Brad, who was sitting across from them, remained quiet, like he was just an observer on the sidelines. "Sure. Surprisingly, the commander gave me a day off, so I'm free today," she replied. Sean yelled cheerfully before giving his father a meaningful glance. "And where would you want to go?" Brad finally spoke. "The amusement park," Sean instantly replied. Brad watched for Haley's response to this. "Mom, is it okay with you?" Sean asked. Haley agreed without hesitation. She just wanted her son to be happy, so there was no way she would ever reject this kind of request from him. Besides, she thought that maybe going out like this and spending more time in a lively place with her two beloved men might help her. After their breakfast, Sean and Haley were left in the kitchen while Brad went to take a call. They were having a happy conversation about amusement parks when Sean blurted out a question completely off topic. "Mom, how can you tell if a person is cute?" he asked. When a person is adorably pleasing, just like you. You're the cutest in the world because everything about you is adorable, especially when you smile, pout, and puff your cheeks," she answered. But Sean just tilted his head. "Is there any way to become even cuter?" he asked. If I wanted to make you cuter, I would definitely dress you up in a super cute costume," she replied as she gently pinched his cheeks. Brad walked back into the room. "We will leave in about an hour," he said, making Haley and Sean excitedly stand up. They all left the kitchen, and Haley went upstairs to pack the things Sean might need for their outing. Brad and Sean remained at the base of the stairs. "Dad," Sean called to get his father's attention and signaled him to bend down so he could whisper to him. "I asked Mom what makes a person cute, and she said she finds it cute when a person smiles. So you have to smile a lot from now on, okay?" he said. His words made Brad smile. He wanted to tell his son that there was no need for him to act cute, but he could see that Sean was trying his best to help. So instead, he just listened to his advice. "Also, she said she found it cute when I pout and puff my cheeks. But I've never seen you pout or puff your cheeks before, so I think this might be a challenge for you because you're an adult. But still, for Mom's sake, how about you try, Dad? It's pretty easy to pout," he said. Then he demonstrated how to pout so seriously that Brad had a hard time containing his laughter. "Dad, how about you practice with me? You can pout like this," Sean said as he pouted. Brad couldn't even speak as he watched his son turn into a little teacher, trying to show him how to pout.
Come on, Dad. Didn't you say you would do your best?
Sean coaxed. Brad rubbed the back of his neck. Sean, I'm an adult. It's weird for a big man like me to do that, he replied, and the little guy puffed his cheeks with disappointment. Looking at his disappointed face, Brad placed his hand on Sean's head and ruffled his hair. You don't have to worry. I have a weapon much more lethal than cuteness, he assured his son. This filled Sean with excitement. Just don't forget about our plan for today, understand? Brad reminded him.
Don't worry, Dad. I won't forget.